Ladies and gentlemen, may I request you to kindly take your seats. The formal program will begin shortly. Please place your mobile phones on silent mode. Due to security guidelines, photography and videography are not permitted during the event. We kindly request all guests to cooperate and refrain from taking photographs or recording videos during the event. Thank you for your understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, our chief guest is on his way. He has arrived. May I request you to kindly take your seats. The formal program will begin momentarily. I request you to again keep your mobile phones on silent mode. And I'd just like to repeat, due to security guidelines, photography and videography are not permitted during the event. We kindly request all guests to cooperate and refrain from taking photographs or recording videos. Thank you for your understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, we expect our chief guest to arrive momentarily. We shall begin the program very soon. Thank you for waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our privilege to invite you to join us in welcoming our esteemed chief guest, Shri 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙀𝙀𝙀 Adani, Chairman Adani Group. May I request Shri 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙀𝙀 Chandrasekharan, Chairman, CareEdge Group, and Shri Mehul Pandya, MD and Group CEO, CareEdge, to welcome our eminent chief guest by presenting him with a bouquet as a gesture of our warm welcome. May we have the bouquet, please? May we please have a round of applause for sir's warm welcome. Thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence here. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of CareEdge, it is our pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed chief guest, distinguished speakers, panelists, industry leaders, partners, and all our valued invitees. Thank you for joining us for CareEdge Infrastructure Landscape, Vision for 𝙑𝙑𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙧 Bharat, and an evening dedicated to insightful conversation on the opportunities, priorities, and ideas shaping the future of India's infrastructure. My name is 𝙑𝙖𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙧, Senior Economist at CareEdge Ratings, and it is my privilege to be your host for the evening. I look forward to taking you through today's program. Once again, welcome and thank you for being with us. We now move to the first formal address of the evening. As India pursues its vision of becoming a developed nation, infrastructure continues to serve as a cornerstone of economic progress, enhancing connectivity, enabling investment, and driving sustainable growth. To set the context for this evening's conversations, I'd like to invite Shri Mehul Pandya, MD and Group CEO, CareEdge, to deliver the thematic address. Stage is yours, sir.
Chairman, CareEdge Group, distinguished leaders from the industry, and esteemed guests. Good evening and a very warm welcome to CareEdge Infrastructure Landscape. It is my privilege and a genuine personal pleasure and honor to welcome our chief guest, 𝘾𝙗𝙯𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙀 Adani, Chairman, Adani Group. Sir, thank you for being here. There are very few individuals whose working life can be read as a map of India's own infrastructure journey. And history records how India built the foundations of its rise globally. It cannot tell that story without telling yours. Infrastructure is the lifeline of any economy, and more so in case of India, with 21 years journey to 𝙑𝙑𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙀 Bharat. Robust and modern infrastructure has positive influence in the form of three critical factors. First, it has a multiplier impact on the economic growth. Second, it has the impact in form of debottlenecking and lowering of the costs. And the third, it is a critical enabler of the businesses and households. For much of our history, we have construed it as our constraint, but today, it is our competitive advantage. Our public capital expenditure has increased sixfold over the last decade or so, and our major ports have handled record cargo in the last financial year. But the real story is being written elsewhere, and that is in the change of philosophy from assets in silos to an integrated ecosystem. There is also a second, quieter shift that deserves our attention. What we count as the infrastructure, that definition itself is broadening, and broadening beyond the physical assets as is traditionally known, and even the digital public infrastructure system. In an efficient and rapidly modernizing economy, new layers are getting added. Can any one of us imagine today to have a smooth ride on the highways without the FASTag? With smart meters at scale, utilities are moving to prepaid billing, collections have been robust, and the regulators can price time of the day tariffs, which could stabilize the grid. Sagar Setu now covers all 13 major ports and 41 non-major ports. So is the tolling layer an infrastructure? Is smart metering an infrastructure? I would argue yes. And the list keeps on growing. Green hydrogen, EV charging, chip fabrication, and data centers. And here is why that matters in this room. This broader infrastructure carries the same economic DNA as the traditional kind. Heavy upfront capital, long gestation, monopolistic features, necessity of regulation for orderly management, and early policy support. No wonder then it must be financed and assessed with the same long time horizon and the discipline attached to that. And consider the scale. A McKinsey report puts the global infrastructure investment requirement at $100+ trillion by 2040. For our own country, an NAFED report states requirement over the next 20 odd years at 770 lakh crores. And when we put that against our ambition of becoming a $25 trillion economy by 2047, even that looks like an underestimate. Earlier this year, our Honorable Prime Minister set out the road ahead in a single sentence, and I quote, "The next record infrastructure upgrading. We are committed to building next generation infrastructure for the people of our nation to realize our vision of Viksit Bharat," unquote. So what does the roadmap require? 4 things. First, stop thinking in projects and start thinking in corridors. A cluster linked to a freight corridor, a modern port, and reliable power is worth far more than the sum of its parts. Second, private capital must carry a larger share. Our PPP model is mature. New sectors like railways are getting added to that. And CareEdge Ratings estimates the InvIT assets AUM near 7.5 lakh crores in the last financial year, double the FY22 level, with asset recycling deepening through the TOT model. Third, the role of government remains central and not residual. The central capital spending has crossed 10 lakh crore rupees, that is above the 3% of the GDP. And fourth, and that matters to us as a rating agency, is the innovation in financial structures. Partial credit guarantee, future flow securitization, and the infrastructure risk guarantee fund, they are all steps in the right direction. And through all of it, let's also remember that physical infrastructure is social infrastructure. A road is a child going to school. A transmission line is an operation theater not going dark. A brief word about your host today. CareEdge Ratings started its journey in 1993, and in these 33 plus years, we have assessed credit risk in the economy. Through the cycles, through macroeconomic challenges, and through the long arc of India's deepening finance. In infrastructure, we have the deepest coverage across the rating industry with more than 35% coverage. And when I look at that from the spectrum of sectors like renewables, power, telecom, and ports, that coverage goes right up to 60%. And that experience and that coverage gives us the vantage point, and that is something encouraging. Our credit ratio for this sector has remained quite strong. And this assessment voice has now gone global. That is in the form of CareEdge Global Ratings, which we started about 20 to 22 months back. And today, we are rating more than 45 sovereign countries, which cover more than 85% of the global GDP. And the third edition of our sovereign rating coverage was released early this year by our Honorable Commerce and Industry Minister, Shri Piyush Goyal, in London. Why does that matter in this room filled with infra builders? That is because the cost of each single project and the cost of capital attached to it depends upon how the world prices India's risk. And that is long shaped by frameworks which have been designed thousands of miles away. An economy that is funding itself deserves to be assessed on evidence and not on inherited assumptions. I must confess one aspect about my profession. Rating analysts are trained skeptics. We are conditioned to imagine what can go wrong, and we are rather good at it. So when a rating agency tells you that it is genuinely optimistic about the India's infrastructure decade ahead, take it as a strong signal. Let me take you back to my early days of professional career in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. First in lending and then in rating. In both these professions, in both these roles, it required to predict the future by projecting the cash flows. And the horizon that we looked at was about 4 to 5 years, and we were taught that beyond 5 years, forecasting becomes fiction. At around that time, some distance away, Shri 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙧 was investing in a barren land in Gujarat and building a port on a vision that was not for 4 to 5 years, but for multiple decades. Projects of that long gestation belonged to the government. But this leader was unusual. He not only visualized it, but he successfully implemented it. Mundra Port today is an economic jewel of India, and he has gone on to add many more such jewels to India's infra landscape. And hence, it is entirely appropriate that we call Shri 𝙤𝙤𝙧𝙧𝙪 as the face of India's infrastructure landscape. In his own words, at an AGM of his company early this year, I quote, "While others debated, your group built, advancing his journey as the world's most integrated infrastructure platform across energy, transport, logistics, and industrial manufacturing," unquote. And he further elaborated on what drives him. Again, I'm quoting, "Not the noise that surrounds us, but the strength of our response. Not the intensity of the challenge, but the clarity of our purpose. And not the criticism, but the nation building we intensely believe in," unquote. The record stands behind the words. Over 1.5 lakh crore in hard infrastructure in FY26, more than 30% of India's entire new private sector capital expenditure. Over 500 million tons of cargo, going right up to 1 billion by 2030. And a new international airport in Navi Mumbai. And that also in 4 years. 4 years, sir. I would say in this city, perhaps a housing society may not be able to decide on the color of its exterior paint in 4 years, and you have built an airport. At an earlier AGM of his company, he shared his mother's counsel. I quote, "History does not remember sailors who sailed in still waters. It remembers those who fought the wildest storms and yet returned home." Unquote. Sir, our vocation is forecasting the weather, and yours has been to sail regardless. Friends, one closing thought. 21 years separate us from 2047. Not a very distant horizon. In fact, one single investment cycle. Most assets that will define Viksit Bharat would be financed and commissioned by the people in this room. The generation before us consolidated our freedom from colonialism. After us will inherit whatever we leave standing. Ours is the generation that must build unshakable foundation of Viksit Bharat. What is being asked of us is clear. Not merely highways, but corridors. Not merely capacity, but capability. And not merely concrete and steel, but credibility. Decades from now, no one is going to read our quarterly results, but they will drive on our roads, they will fly from our airports, they will ship from our ports, and they will switch on our grids. India's infrastructure decade has begun. The intent is national. The capital shall be available with our global heft. The talent is ours. What remains is our resolve. So let us build a nation that is connected, competitive, energy secure, digitally empowered, and decisively confident. And let us build it fast enough that our children never have to describe India in future tense. Shri Gautam Bhai, once again, a very warm welcome, and I am sure that your passion shall rub on all of us as you take the podium. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Mr. Chandrasekharan, Mr. Mehul Pandya, MD and CEO, CareEdge Group, distinguished guests, and my dear friends. Namaskar and good evening. It is a privilege to be here with all of you today. I want to begin by congratulating CareEdge Group for completing more than 3 decades of immense contributions to India's economic journey. Our relationship with CareEdge now stretches to almost more than 20 years. Today, that relationship extends to over 3 lakh crore of rated assets across 100 plus entities. And there is indeed a fascinating parallel in our journeys. CareEdge was established in 1993 at the beginning of India's economic transformations. It was a time when a new generations of entrepreneurs were emerging. New opportunities were opening up, and India was beginning to believe in its own possibilities. I was also beginning my own entrepreneurial journey around that same period. Like every entrepreneur, I had ambition, I had ideas, I had dreams. But I learned very early that ideas alone do not build institutions. Ideas need credibility. Credibility creates trust. Trust unlocks capital, and capital turns ambitions into a reality. Institutions like CareEdge Group sit precisely at these intersections. Therefore, today, I wanted to speak about something essential, and that is, how do we ensure that the frameworks which measures India's risk are also capable of recognizing India's possibilities. My dear friends, as rating analyst, you hold immense power in your hands, because behind every rating you assign is not just a project, a balance sheet, or a number. There is a human consequence to that judgment. A rating you give to a pot project means people from villages around that pot can find employment. A rating you give to a renewable energy projects means a child in rural India can study under reliable light. A rating may be expressed in a letter or a number, but its impact is measured in the dreams it enables and the opportunity it creates. That is why your responsibility is so significant. And that responsibility becomes even more significant when we reflect on the scale of transformations taking place around us as we go through one of the most remarkable uplifting periods in India's economic history. My dear friends, a generation ago, when I began my journey of helping build India's infrastructure, our ambitions were constrained by three things: limited resources, limited capabilities, and limited confidence. Today, that India has changed. India has the resources. India has demonstrated the capability. And most importantly, India has discovered the confidence to dream at a scale once thought impossible. जब भारत अपने सामर्थ्य पर करे अटूट विश्वास, जब भारत अपने सामर्थ्य पर करे अटूट विश्वास, तभी वह संयम लिखता है अपने भविष्य का इतिहास। Look around you. Our roads are expanding at unprecedented speed. Our ports are transforming. Our airports are connecting more nations than ever before. Our renewable energy capacity is growing faster than any other nation on earth. Our digital infrastructure is reaching hundreds of millions. But as the scale of our ambition grows, so does the importance of the frameworks that judge it. Transformational infrastructures can be constrained not only by a lack of ambitions or capital, but also by the frameworks through which its risks are assessed. This is not a call for a less scrutiny. It is not a call for an easier rating. And it is not a call to compromise independence. My point is exactly the opposite. India does not need lower standards. India needs wider lenses. I believe many of our analytical frameworks were developed for an age in which infrastructure evolved incrementally, demand was relatively visible, and the boundaries of an asset were easier to define. They were typically built on a siloed, single asset, discounted cash flow models that price risk by isolating an asset from its environment. India has now entered a very different period. The nature of infrastructure has changed, and the sophistications of our rating frameworks must evolve alongside the sophistications of what India is building. Let me walk you through 3 experiences from my own journey. Each one shows something critical about where traditional rating frameworks may not fully capture the India that is actually emerging. My first story is about our port in Mundra, in Gujarat, and now by far India's largest port. When we began developing Mundra 3 decades ago, our traditional rating assessment might have looked like this: a marshy coastline with no industrial ecosystems, speculative demand from customers that did not exist yet, execution risk in a region with limited infrastructure, a 30-year cash flow model built on assumptions that no spreadsheet could validate. Today, Mundra is easily one of India's most important commercial gateways. But more importantly, Mundra has created an ecosystem multiple times the size of the port. It is a port connected to rail connected to logistics centers, logistics connected to power plants, power connected to industrial zones connected to traders and manufacturers, all across India. Mundra proved that platform infrastructures operates as a multi-layer network where each new layer cross-subsidizes, feeds, and de-risks the other, creating an economic compounding flywheel that linear financial models mostly fail to capture. If we build only for the demand we can see today, India will always be late for the opportunities of tomorrow. जो आज की सीमा से आगे देखे वही करते कल का निर्माण, जो आज की सीमा से आगे देखे वही करते हैं कल का निर्माण, जो आने वाले भारत को गढ़े समय करता उसी का सम्मान। Let me now talk about the second story, our Vizhinjam port in Kerala. For decades, India recognized a strategic problem it had. We sat just 10 nautical miles away from the world's busiest shipping routes, yet we could not handle our own container cargo. We had to transship through Singapore, Dubai and Colombo. For decades, Indian commerce paid a direct sovereignty tax to foreign ports simply because domestic infrastructure was deemed too risky for institutional capital. And for 25 years, nobody could build a solution. Tender after tender failed. The engineering was deemed too complex. The breakwater was too deep. The capital risk was too immense. Even with a large viability gap funding, traditional frameworks struggle to justify the project. Vizhinjam was strategically compelling yet unprofitable when measured through conventional financial tastes. we built it anyways. Within 18 months, it became the fastest Indian port ever to achieve 2 million TEUs. But here is what I want us to understand. The greatest risk was never in building wooden jumps. The greatest risk was India continuing to believing that it could not. Conventional credit models correctly measure execution risk, but in strategic infrastructure, we must also learn to recognize the economic value of sovereign resilience. Because projects that transform nations often look impossible until somebody builds them. जो सागर की लहरों में भी राष्ट्रहित का ध्वज लहरा है, जो सागर की लहरों में भी राष्ट्रहित का ध्वज लहरा है, वही असंभव को संभव करे और नए भारत को पार लगाए। My third story is set in the run of Kutch, an area regarded as the most barren land in India. It is here that we are building something extraordinary, a 30 gigawatt renewable energy platform visible even from space. When you look at 𝙑𝙗 through a traditional framework, you see extreme isolations, harsh desert, execution risk, and demand that is uncertain. These are real challenges, and the caution is justified. But what is missed is that 𝙑𝙗 is not a renewable energy project, or more accurately, renewable energy is only one part of a much larger vision. 𝙑𝙗 is a platform where energy, artificial intelligence, manufacturing, digital infrastructures, and industrial capability converge at an unprecedented scale. It can provide the clean electrons required to power India's future compute infrastructures. It is the foundations for India's AI manufacturing ecosystems. It can become part of the foundations upon which India's AI economy is built. Measured simply as a power project, 𝙑𝙗 will be underrated for decades. But when measured as a transformational platform, it will be one of India's most important strategic assets. This is why I say that तपते रण को बना दिया ऊर्जा का वरदान, तपते रण को बना दिया ऊर्जा का वरदान, सूर्य पवन की शक्ति से जगमगाए हिंदुस्तान। My dear friends, rating frameworks often measure individual assets. But we must realize that the real value in today's age is being created at the intersections where energy plus data plus manufacturing converge. It is here that I want to acknowledge a reality which every rating professional in this room understands deeply. Your responsibility is a difficult one because you sit at the intersections of ambition and accountability. On one side, you carry the responsibility to protect capital, to question assumptions, to recognize execution challenges, and to ensure that risks are properly quantified. That responsibility is essential. But there is another equally important responsibility, and that is understanding and rating the larger transformation taking place around us. The challenges often having to choose between caution and ambitions. The role of an institution like CareEdge Group is to ensure that ambition is not constrained by fear and that risk is not ignored in the path to progress. Allow me to elaborate the way I see it. There are three kinds of infrastructures. First is a replacement infrastructures, expanding what already exists, maintaining proven assets, replacing aging capacity. Traditional rating frameworks work well here. Second is a growth infrastructures, adding capacity in established sectors where demand is visible and economics are broadly understood. Here, existing frameworks should evolve to capture ecosystem effects and a multiplier value, not just stand-alone cash flows. Third is a platform infrastructures. These are assets like Mundra, Vizhinjam, Khavda that create entirely new capabilities, combine multiple infrastructure layers and reshape the economics around them. Platforms like Mundra, Vizhinjam and Khavda do not just satisfy existing demand, they create new demand, they create new ecosystems, they create new capabilities, they change the economics around them, and therefore they require an analytical framework capable of measuring not just stand-alone cash flows, but also ecosystem multiplier, strategic resilience, and adjacencies value. Because the most defining infrastructure of the future will not only integrate to move people, goods, or energy, but will amplify the intelligence and the productivity of entire economy. And it is precisely this shift from the type of infrastructure that moves the economy to the new type of infrastructure that makes the economy smarter, which brings me to AI. At Adani, we are seeing this convergence firsthand across our own energy, data centers, and digital infrastructure initiatives. AI may look like a software, but ultimately AI runs on an infrastructure. Algorithms will improve, models will change, software will evolve, but every AI model ultimately needs electrons. It needs data centers. It needs cooling. It needs transmission networks. It needs land. And increasingly, it needs clean, reliable energy at an enormous scale. Therefore, the competitive advantage in AI may ultimately lie not only in who writes the best code, but also in who can build the infrastructure that allows intelligence to scale. That is why assets such as Khavda should not be viewed only as a power generation capacity. Their strategic value lies in the ecosystems that can enable compute, advanced manufacturing, digital infrastructure, and industrial capability, all of which are foundational infrastructures for the AI economy. Let me be clear about what I am stating. We do not need lower standards, but we need wider lenses. I am not asking you to compromise your independence or say yes to unviable ambition. I am asking you to use your independence to build dynamic models that recognize the compounding power of national platforms. Because in the years ahead, decisions made by people in room like this will influence which infrastructure platforms receive capital, which ideas are able to scale, and which national capabilities India is able to build for itself. So today, I would like to place a challenge before CareEdge team. Why should the world's first truly comprehensive credit framework for integrated platform infrastructures not come from India? Why should CareEdge not lead it? Develop a framework capable of evaluating multidimensional infrastructures, a framework that recognizes ecosystem multipliers, a framework that recognizes adjacencies values, and perhaps one day emerging economics around the world will use a framework developed here in India as their benchmark. And so, my dear friends, as I wrap up, let me leave you with few concluding thoughts. Over the past 3 decades of building infrastructures, I have seen my share of success and setbacks. But one lesson has stayed with me, that the true value of what we build is rarely captured only in a financial statements. The real measure is found in the lives transformed. And this is the lesson I have learned as I look my journey of building infrastructure. That the greatest infrastructure is not a monument to those who built it, but is a foundations upon which a nation builds its future. And this is what your work enables. Because every national capability begins as an idea that someone must first have the confidence to back. Therefore, our rating is not just a letter or a number. It is a judgment of trust. The decisions you make will influence which ideas receive confidence, which platforms receive capital, and which capabilities India is able to build. That is a tremendous responsibility. So, as CareEdge Group continue its journey, I offer both my gratitude and my belief in your role to protect trust, to strengthen discipline, to continuously evolve, and to ensure that India's ambitions are supported by institutions equal to the scale of his aspirations. Because the India of 2047 will not be built by ambition alone. It will be built when ambition earns trust, when trust unlocks capital, and when capital builds a national capability. जहां हर भारतीय के सपनों को मिले ऊंची उड़ान, जहां हर भारतीय के सपनों को मिले ऊंची उड़ान, जहां आत्मविश्वास बने भारत की नई पहचान, जहां सामर्थ्य और संकल्प बढ़ाए राष्ट्र का सम्मान, जहां सामर्थ्य और संकल्प बढ़ाए राष्ट्र का सम्मान, वही भारत बनेगा विकसित, समर्थ और महान। That is the India, my friends, we must build together. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir, for that inspiring address and for sharing your valuable perspective with us. We are deeply grateful for you to grace this occasion with your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in giving Sri Gautam Adani another warm and heartfelt round of applause. As a token of our appreciation, may I request our chairman, Sri V. Chandrasekharan, to present a memento to our esteemed chief guest, Sri Gautam Adani, on behalf of the CareEdge family. We now mark an important milestone, the official release of the CareEdge Infrastructure Report, which presents CareEdge's perspective on the evolving infrastructure landscape or the opportunities supporting India's journey towards Viksit Bharat. For this occasion, may I request Sri Sachin Gupta and Ms. Revati Kasture to join Sri Gautam Adani, Sri V. Chandrasekharan and Sri Mehul Pandya on stage. I request all our dignitaries to come together to unveil the CareEdge Infrastructure Report. May we have a round of applause, please. Thank you. May I now invite the senior leadership team of CareEdge to kindly join our dignitaries on stage for a group photograph. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence today. May we have a warm round of applause, please, for Gautam Adani, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, after a quick break of 5 minutes, we will start the next session. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, the QR code displayed on the screen will give you access to the CareEdge infrastructure report released today. I request you to scan the code using your mobile phones and download the report for your reference. Thank you. I'll keep. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning our panel discussion shortly. So I request you all to take your seats, please. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is now set and we are ready to move on to our next session. I kindly request you to take your seats, please. We now turn to one of the most critical pillars of India's growth story, energy security. To set the context for our discussion, I invite Shri Jatin Arya, Director, CareEdge Ratings, to present key insights on the theme, Powering India's Energy Security. What's next for India's energy transition? Jatin, the stage is all yours. Yeah. I should go. Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation is all set. The stage is set. I kindly request you all to take your seats, please.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to present CareEdge Ratings perspective on India's power sector. In this presentation, we'll take a brief look at the key developments shaping the India's power sector. We'll briefly look at the overall power demand along with the growth in the peak demand, followed by developments across key generation segments, including thermal, nuclear, as well as renewables. We'll also touch upon the growing role of storage and domestic manufacturing, and finally end this presentation with by discussing the financial health of the state distribution utilities. Let me start with India's overall installed power capacity. India's installed capacity has increased from 305 gigawatt as on FY16 end to 549 gigawatt as on Q1 FY27 end. Most of this incremental capacity has actually come from renewables, which along with hydro now contribute for more than 50% of our installed capacity base. This also means that India has achieved its Paris Agreement commitments almost 4 years ahead of schedule. However, capacity and generation tell two very different stories. Despite the rapid growth of renewables, the share of fossil sources continue to remain high at above 70% of the overall generation mix. However, going forward, with the growth in renewables, we expect the share of renewables aided by storage to move up to 40% by FY32. Moving on to the power demand, FY26 was a relatively muted year that was largely due to an early and prolonged monsoon, apart from a higher base effect. However, we've seen a clear rebound in FY27. In the 4 months of FY27, the overall power demand has increased by around 9%, and the peak power demand, in fact, has increased by a rate of 12%, and it touched an all-time high of 271 gigawatt in May 2026. The underlying demand drivers also remain quite diversified. The first and foremost being the rising temperatures resulting in the need for higher cooling demand, followed by sustained industrial growth, urbanization and increase in per capita consumption of electricity, and also the increasing role of transportation. Coming to generation, thermal power is regaining its strategic importance given the rising demand and the intermittency of renewables. Thermal capacity additions alone stood at 9.5 gigawatt for FY26, and they had remained muted before FY26. So this clearly shows the resurgence in thermal demand. The revival has actually been supported by 3 pillars. Apart from the growth in the power demand, there has been better offtake visibility for thermal, fuel security has improved, and there has been consolidation in the industry, which has actually improved the underlying credit profile of players. CareEdge Ratings understands that close to 21 gigawatt of new PPAs have been signed, and another 13 gigawatt are under the pipeline, under the Section 63, under the bidding route. This apart, state GenCos and central GenCos also continue to sign their power purchase agreements under the Section 62. Domestic coal, on the other hand, has also provided the added fuel security risk, with growth in coal being almost close to 5% over the last decade. Thirdly, the consolidation in the industry and the buoyant merchant prices have ensured that the balance sheet of the various private players continue to remain deleveraged to a certain extent. That said, renewables will continue to drive most of the capacity additions, and with their must-run status, we expect thermal PLFs, which are around 70% right now, to come down to close to 60% by the end of FY32. Moving on to nuclear. Nuclear is an emerging and another high potential growth segment wherein we expect a significant step up in activity. India actually needs reliable round-the-clock power, and also it wants to pursue its decarbonization goals, making nuclear a very important part of the future generation mix. We have installed capacity of around 9 gigawatt for nuclear, and we expect that to increase up to 100 gigawatt by 2047. To achieve this, government is actually looking beyond the traditional model and is opening the sector to private participation. The Shanti Act is a very important enabler in this. It's allowing the licensed Indian power producers to build, own and operate nuclear plants, and at the same time, government would take control of sensitive areas pertaining to fuel security. The reforms also address the historical concern around nuclear liability through a graded nuclear liability mechanism, development of a nuclear liability fund, and provision of mandatory insurance. Combined with budgetary support for small and modular reactors, this is likely to improve the investor confidence. So the opportunity is significant in the nuclear domain, but execution will be the key, and nuclear is likely to remain a very keenly watched area over the medium term. Moving on to the renewables. Of the total 289 gigawatt of renewable capacity, around 57%, that is 165 gigawatt, comprises solar. The challenge with solar is its intermittency. It generates predominantly during the day and then vanishes as the sun sets. While the must-run status means we have to absorb everything that is generated from solar, and as a result of which, thermal has to either ramp up or ramp down. This is clearly visible in Exhibit 7, wherein we compare the country's net load curves across 2 days, which are 1 year apart. Net load is effectively the total energy consumed minus what has been contribution by the solar. So effectively, if you see, there is a trough that is being formed. If we compare both the lines, the trough in FY26 seems to be much more steeper than what was the case in FY25. If I have to quantify the numbers, the morning ramp up has increased from 28 gigawatt as on that particular day to 50 gigawatt in FY26, and the morning ramp down has increased from 28 gigawatt to 50 gigawatt, and the evening ramp up has increased from 68 gigawatt to 80 gigawatt. This increasing volatility is creating a greater need of grid flexibility and balancing resources. One way to address this storage is charging during the day when the solar generation is high and discharging during the evening peak. This can actually flatten the net load curve and integrate more renewables. There are two primary technologies that will aid in flattening this net load curve. One is pumped storage, the second is batteries. Pumped storage is better suited for long duration storage. It allows storage up to 6 to 8 hours and has asset life exceeding 40 years. BESS, on the other hand, offers modularity, faster deployment, and greater site flexibility. Importantly, renewables combined with storage, if you look at the tariffs that have come up, the tariffs are below 5.5 rupees, and they continue to pose a challenge for thermal and nuclear. However, whether RE plus storage can fully replicate the round-the-clock availability, flexibility, and baseload characteristics that thermal offers, and that to offer at a scale, would continue to be a key monitorable. Therefore, we believe thermal will continue to play a critical role in ensuring grid reliability, even as renewables plus storage gains prominence. Moving on to the solar manufacturing front, India has made significant progress towards self-sufficiency, particularly on the modules. We have an installed capacity of 210 gigawatt, which is roughly 3 times our annual peak demand of 70 gigawatt. The bigger gap remains on the cell side, wherein we have an installed capacity of 32 gigawatt. Thus, there is some reliance on imports. So the challenge is increasing. However, by the end of this year, we expect cell capacity also to leapfrog up to 70 gigawatt. So the challenge is increasingly shifting from building capacity to efficiently utilizing that capacity. We already have significant surplus module capacity, and domestic demand alone is unlikely to absorb it. Hence, exports would continue to remain very critical. Overall, the manufacturing push is clearly a positive from an energy security and a supply chain perspective, but the next phase will be about finding sustainable markets to absorb this capacity. So far, we've looked at the supply side: thermal, nuclear, renewables, storage, and domestic solar manufacturing. But ultimately, all of this has to translate into a financially sustainable power sector. And that brings us to the DISCOMs, the critical link between GENCOs and the consumers. There's been a meaningful improvement in DISCOM performance, with AT&C losses declining from around 22% in FY19 to 15% as on for FY25. This sharp reduction has primarily come on account of improvement in billing and collection discipline. Apart from this, we also see that the payables to the GENCOs have also reduced. This has only been possible on account of strong policy support by the government in the form of RDSS, enhancing coverage through smart meters, ensuring strong payment discipline, and timely release of subsidies. The key concern, however, remains the high DISCOM debt, which remains close to rupees 7.3 trillion as on FY25 end. So while the operating and liquidity metrics are clearly moving in the right direction, sustaining these improvements and addressing the underlying leverage will be critical for the long-term health of the power sector. So to sum up, India's power sector is entering into a strong investment cycle driven by robust demand and significant capacity addition across thermal, renewables, nuclear, and storage. However, execution would continue to remain key, both in building of renewables as well as transmission infrastructure, with there being concerns around availability of land, regulatory issues, as well as right-of-way clearances. The rapid growth of renewables is also bringing challenges around curtailments, and we need storage to complement renewables. At the same time, energy security is becoming increasingly important, given the dependence on China for sourcing components of solar supply chain as well as batteries. Finally, the DISCOM payment discipline is improving and it's very encouraging. However, high debt levels continue to remain a concern. Overall, the opportunity is significant. The next phase will be about execution, building reliable capacity, strengthening the grid, adding flexibility, and ensuring sustainability across the power value chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arya, for that insightful presentation and for setting the stage for what promises to be a very engaging discussion. We will now have our first panel discussion of the evening. I invite Shri Sachin Gupta, Executive Director and Chief Ratings Officer, CareEdge Ratings, to moderate the discussion on the opportunities, challenges, and pathways shaping India's energy future. I now invite our distinguished panelists to the stage. Please welcome Shri Kuldeep Jain, Founder and Managing Director, CleanMax. Mr. Jain founded CleanMax in 2010. Under his leadership, CleanMax has grown into one of India's leading renewable energy providers for the commercial and industrial sector, with a significant presence across India and international markets. Recently, CleanMax has been successfully listed on India's stock exchanges. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and being with us today. Please welcome Shri Sandeep Lakhanpal, Managing Director at I2 Capital, a leading global infrastructure investment firm with over $60 billion in assets under management. With more than 22 years of experience in infrastructure M&A, fundraising, and investment management, he has played a key role in some of India's largest transportation and infrastructure transactions. Thank you, sir, for being with us here today. Let's welcome Shri Kailash Vaswani, Chief Financial Officer of ReNew. A member of ReNew's founding team, Mr. Vaswani has played a pivotal role in the company's growth over the past 14 years, leading capital raising efforts that have secured more than $10 billion in debt and equity financing. He has been instrumental in building one of India's leading clean energy platforms, driving initiatives in renewable energy, corporate decarbonization, green hydrogen, amongst others. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Please welcome Shri Abhishek Parikh, Chief Financial Officer of the Waaree Group. Mr. Parikh has nearly 2 decades of experience in corporate finance, treasury, capital markets, and mergers and acquisitions. Since joining the Waaree Group in 2017, he has played a pivotal role in the company's growth, leading acquisitions, fundraising initiatives, private equity transactions, and public market listings. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and joining us today. Over to you, Mr. Gupta, to begin the discussion.
I didn't have mics here, so let me use a minute and set the context till the time the mics kind of come up. So, I think the presentation was quite good, quite comprehensive in terms of what Jatin shared. But broadly, the way I see it, India is actually at a triad, especially in the energy sector that I see. We have rapid economic growth. We need energy security, especially with the geopolitical tensions, and we are on a path of decarbonization. So what we really are seeing is a triad of economic growth, decarbonization, and energy security. What are the risks? And in this panel discussion, we will cover mostly what are the risks that we are seeing, especially on the transmission infra. That is one thing which Jatin covered. That is actually a big risk. Also on storage, whether we have solutions which will really help us reach the massive growth targets that we have. And also the financial health of DISCOMs, whether that's really something which is going to be on a steady state basis. So I think with the setting the context, I will now So as I said, we will be looking at the risks that the overall power sector is facing. One of the big risks that, especially in the green energy side, that we are seeing is the risk of curtailment. And essentially, for those of you who may not be familiar, it's basically the lack of transmission. So we have capacities which are coming up, which have already come up in some cases, but there is a challenge of evacuating the power because the transmission infrastructure is not built yet, and that is really a sad situation because all the money has been spent, and when the time for using that power for really doing its intended purpose, we are facing a challenge. Right now, as per some data, 15 to 20% of our total solar power is actually stuck on account of curtailment. So maybe first question, Kuldeep, if you can give us a sense, how do you see, is this a short-term challenge or are we really going to face this on an ongoing basis?
I think it's definitely the number one issue facing renewables today. As you rightly pointed out, I think for us as a company, the impact is slightly lesser because 88% of our capacity is STU connected, and this issue is more with CTUs, and in particular CTU capacity in Rajasthan and Kutch, where suddenly we have a lot of new renewables which have gone in. So maybe the issue is a bit lesser for us as a company, but for the sector and the industry, it is the number one issue facing us today. And unfortunately, it is an issue which is out of any renewable energy developer's control. Because the grid told you that if you don't commission by so-and-so date, we will ensure that you do not have this capacity. So we have to build. And the industry invested billions to get there. And the grid says, oh, we are delayed, or, you can connect, but we can't really evacuate because something else is delayed. So it is a massive issue. There is no running away from it.
Thank you. Kailash, Renew has a large portfolio of, certain these assets. What is your reading on this curtailment risk? How is that panning out in your mind?
Yeah, it is affecting obviously everybody in the industry, and unlike Kuldeep, we don't have the benefit of that much STU, so there we are obviously getting impacted quite heavily. Good news at least is that one, the government recognizes the problem and they're trying to deal with it, and I think we are working with them to come up with a solution to address this issue, because we have lost cash flows during this period, and just trying to find a way to compensate to the extent it is for reasons not attributable to us. And the build out is happening on the transmission front, and I think government is seized of the matter. So MNRE is putting a lot of pressure on CTU to at least get all of these projects, the transmission projects commissioned, and helping wherever they can, by using state machinery also. So hopefully in the next, we are expecting in the next 6-9 months, things should be much better.
But do you think this will be a structural issue? Because, as I see it, it's relatively quicker to set up a renewable energy project, maybe say less than a year, whereas a transmission project will take like typically 3 to 4 years. So if we were to build out, say, over the next 3 to 4 years, we will always be playing catch up in this sense as we are doing right now?
No, so actually, the current issue is a little bit nuanced to the extent that mostly we also, try to time our projects in line with the immediate transmission line. But as, because it's a central grid, there are multiple lines which need to be built through the whole chain.
Got it.
I think there is a missing link in the entire chain.
Okay.
And that is why there is this issue that we are facing, which was totally not anticipated.
Got it.
I think, there will be now more work that we'll have to do, when we are planning our projects to see, whether the full chain is working or not. Hopefully, once they strengthen the grid through these green corridors, things should be much better.
Got it. Thank you. Sandeep, 𝙤𝙤𝙧 Capital is they have launched a fund, right? A Cube Grid, $1 billion investment there. So how do you see is that also going to be a critical component for investment in the power side in your overall vertical, and how transmission is? Normally, we've not seen much investments in the transmission generally. So that's where this question.
Yeah, so we've just launched our platform called Cube Grid. We have 3 transmission lines under it. We want to put in about $1 billion of equity into that platform. As Kailash and Kuldeep said, the key constraint in achieving the 500 gigawatt renewable capacity remains the transmission. I think there is a lot of work being done by the government, a lot of bids coming in, almost 4 to 5 gigawatt worth of evacuation bids come every month. So there is a very large capacity which is being bid out and built. To be honest, I think that you will still see some constraint in that transmission, because what we are seeing is that given like any other infrastructure sector, a lot of bids are going very competitive. So much so that the reality of those assets coming on soon may actually not happen, because unlike a lot of other infrastructure projects, the entire right of way has to be taken by the developer himself. And right of way actually is becoming more expensive, but even more difficult to actually get it, especially in dense corridors, etc., last mile, etc. The constraint with transmission is that, out of 100 kilometer, 99 kilometer gets done within timeline. It's that 1 kilometer which takes, 2, 3, 5 years, etc. And unless you get that 1 kilometer, the entire 99 is actually useless.
Got it.
So I think that the government and the developers need to actually think about the ROW very, very carefully. Otherwise, while on paper a lot of capacity would have bid out, but in terms of execution, in terms of output, we will still see a constraint.
Got it. Great. Abhishek, let me draw you in. So while here we are seeing transmission not really panning out and still a challenge, on the solar manufacturing side, in some ways, we saw modules are over. Already we have a capacity which is created, which is more than what India needs on an annual basis. Cell is also catching up fast. How do you see that, since you looking at this, one of the largest companies in India in this space, is there an overcapacity, and is it that we have over exuberance? While I must say that I think solar manufacturing and backward integration has been one of the key strategic policy decisions taken by the government to protecting and letting that industry grow. So in a way it is good, but are you seeing an overcapacity being created and therefore challenges there?
If you look at the installations of India last year, around 45 plus odd gigawatts, and if we look at the run rate of this financial year, looks like that will be in 50s-ish kind of a range of overall installations, rooftop, ground-mount put together. While nameplate capacity of module capacity as per LMO 1 stands at around 210 to 217 gigawatt and keep expanding every alternate month. But the true meaning of capacity in India is evolving, brightly driven by the vision that India really wants to create not just pure play assembling line, but a true manufacturing, hardcore manufacturing, which entails from module to cell to ingot to wafer, eventually maybe someday at polysilicon also. Now, if you zoom out and try to look at, if we now look at the demand of, let's say, 55, 60 gigs this year, and look at the integrated capacity of module cells, the range is around 30, 32 odd gigawatts as per the recent ALMM2 list. And most, we also expect over next 18 to 24 months of time, we'll be in a kind of 70, 80 gigawatt worth of capacity as far as cell manufacturing is concerned. And while we reach 2028, we have ALMM3 guideline, which is already out there with some preconditions. Like ALMM1 had deferment twice. It took 2.5 years for India to actually finally roll it out. ALMM2 was on time as per guideline, except a 6-month kind of push. While ALMM3, we believe that should create some record by maybe coming on time or prior time, because if you look at the capacity of ingot, wafer and mother, backward integration, these are underbuilt up. And that's a seriousness of overall manufacturing fraternity that we are truly looking at, and not just manufacturing to what creates the higher value addition in terms of value, but also in terms of the technical, also in terms of the supply chain resilience, which creates only if you control the supply chain right from the maybe extracting the material from source and converting it to polysilicon. So if you look at from that perspective, really doesn't looks like that over next 4-5 years of time, even if we stick to only the current guidelines of ALMM3, we'll be in a point when we will have overcapacities as an integrated energy manufacturing ecosystem in solar.
Yeah, so basically people who are fully backward integrated, they will have an advantage, and people who pretty much are there only in the low value added will kind of find it difficult, right? That's a fair assumption, fair conclusion to draw?
Yes, certainly. And while we do this, there are other exigencies which are also started playing up, as we saw in the earlier part of this evening's discussion, that it's all about ecosystem which is integrated and not just a silo manufacturing.
Okay.
And similar thing and of principle lies here in manufacturing. If you only look at solar panel module, I would say it hardly captures in today's value terms. Let's say if it is an FDRE project, solar panel won't be more than 30% of the total value of the infrastructure, while in pure play solar it was 60-65%. So since the definitions is changing, we have to also look at from as infra perspective. We not just need solar, we really need inverter, we really need structures, we really need energy storage, best manufacturing to evolve in India. And I think we have got a decadal-long journey to see as a country while we play out as a pure-play manufacturing ecosystem that clusters.
Got it. Great, thanks. One of the things which Jatin mentioned in the presentation was how renewable plus storage is kind of becoming really the order of the day, and obviously all the new bids are coming which are not purely solar or purely wind, which is order of the day now. The question that we have is that we are seeing the cost have started to inch up. I mean, it could be because of geopolitical issues, supply chain disruptions, etc. Both on the battery side and to some extent on the module prices as well. Silver has become expensive and all that. So, Kuldeep, question to you is: is this like within the realm of minor modifications in the business plan kind of a thing, or are you seeing this cost making some projects unviable itself?
We see that, from a customer perspective, suppose you have a manufacturing unit in Maharashtra or anywhere in the country, you should be able to save at least 25% up to 40% of your power bill by sourcing green power, right? Now, state by state, the mix of wind, solar and storage changes. West and South India, we have wind, so we supply from wind solar hybrid power plants. In Haryana, it will be more solar plus BESS. So that technology mix will change by state given resource efficiency. But fundamentally, for any manufacturing unit, so if you want to do Make in India, I always say do Make in India with cheaper, greener power. right? Which is both lowers your factor cost of production and also improves the carbon footprint of your product, so that as a manufacturer or data center, if you are connected to a global value chain, you have a lower carbon footprint product. And of course, improve your ESG score. So it's a win-win-win, win on money, win on the revenue side of the business because of a low carbon footprint product, and win on ESG. So we are not seeing that change too much. And what we should also not forget is there's inflation in grid power also. If India inflation is about, say, 4%, then grid power prices also inflate at 2 to 3% on average per year. So some of these things, you pass out, like for instance, the Make in India program increases the cost of solar modules, land increases, but also efficiency improves. So you have to look at the overall package. I think it's still very compelling.
Got it. Kailash, one thing is that on the comparison, the battery that we are saying, what I'm told is what used to be 1 crore per megawatt hour is more recently gone up quite substantially. And is it that, we are facing challenges in securing technologies, we are not making domestic, we're largely dependent on China, and there are geopolitical issues there. And is that gonna be in some ways a deal breaker? Because unless we get cheaper batteries, the whole renewable plus storage becomes kind of a question mark. So how do you see that risk panning out?
Yeah. So Sachin, see, as far as battery costs are concerned, we've seen them already fall quite significantly, right? They used to be $300, per, megawatt hour, literally, it was like 5 years ago, I would say. And now, it came down to, maybe 60, 70, 80. And it's maybe inched up again a little bit, but I think it's still significantly down. Now, what happens miraculously in this sector is that when the prices are the highest, pretty much nobody is executing at that point in time, and you manage to get your extension in project, either your transmission is delayed. Right now MNRE's announced a 4-5 month war-related extension in the COD of projects. So I don't think spot prices matter as much. It's mostly the long-term trend, and I think that remains intact. And we are not expecting, current prices to sort of sustain for a long period of time. It's likely to come off maybe 6 months, 12 months later, which is when, mostly the sourcing would happen. Assumptions which people are making right now on the more recent bids which have happened are significantly lower than even, the assumptions which, could be like, say, more reasonable to make, because people are expecting a longer term trajectory to be lower. Now, all our conversations with suppliers is that, there is a 5-year type of reduction in cost, which is likely the way it happened in case of solar modules, also driven by, improvement in technology on wafer cells, which happened in case of solar, and more so in case of solar battery cells, which could happen in case of BESS technology. So we are not expecting, this to sort of spoil the party for FDRE projects. I think, as more and more, scheduling forecasting is done, there is more track record of, doing that successfully, the DSM framework working out. I think renewable will continue to sort of be a good alternate to conventional sources of power.
Got it. Sandeep, let me get you in. And this is my favorite question. Almost in all the panels I will ask you. Are we seeing a line of sight wherein we can be completely dependent on only renewable plus storage? I mean, and is when the commercials become, as Kuldeep was referring, it's good for commercials, it's good for environment. At a utility scale, do you think that whatever FDRE and all that RTC that we're talking about, or is it still some distance, especially in the context of, when I said battery costs inching up, so that kind of plays a bit of spoil sport. But do you see a line of sight that we can just do renewable and, not really dependent much at all on fossil fuels?
So I think two parts to your question. One is, see, in terms of economics, actually on paper, if you look at FDRE, and if you look at various configurations, but even if you look at configuration which is very close to thermal, like a base load, the pricing of FDRE in that configuration is already cheaper than coal, a new coal plant, not existing, but a new coal plant, because of two reasons. Because battery prices are coming down, modules are actually stabilized, and unlike and conversely in coal, the fixed costs have gone up, and there is a escalation in fuel cost every year, whereas in FDRE the fuel cost is actually free. So in the latest tender that our portfolio company Hexa participated in, a configuration which was very close to base load, the tariff that got discovered was 5.25 rupees, whereas coal, I think, if you look at some of the tender MP, etc., to Tor and Adani, it was closer to 6 rupees. So I think in terms of economics, we are already there. Maybe not fully like to like, but I think in terms of largely we are actually reached a stage where the FDRE is actually cheaper than coal. Having said that, I don't think that we can be an economy, even in foreseeable future, that will depend only on solar, wind and battery, precisely because in terms of the quantum of energy that we require, right, given the CUFs and the amount of land, etc., water that you require, the coal will always trump the renewable power. Already we are seeing that the renewable, see why this issue of transmission and curtailment, right? Because the renewable is going far away, because we don't have land in the traditional corridors that we always had. So we are going, for example, we are going right close to the border, for example, with Pakistan, and there the transmission was never anticipated. So more and more renewable will go away and therefore the land requirement, actually water requirement, becomes very critical. So I don't think in foreseeable future we will replace thermal, and that's why you see the large capacity additions in thermal still required by the country.
So there will be good co-survival of the multiple, and the nuclear is yet to kind of pan out. That's the other big daddy. Abhishek, you mentioned about the backward integration into this, but again, do we see a line of sight for us to really go up to the polysilicon level? Because most of the investments that we are seeing are up to the cells, maybe some to the wafers, but preforms and polysilicon is still, I think, not yet a business case. And obviously China has huge capacities at, marginal cost will be much, much lower. So A, do you think we have a line of sight? And B, do you think India needs to do that? Because, if China has significantly high capacities, low marginal cost, then why build the whole infrastructure here? I know energy security is the theme, but do you think at some stage we may realize it's better to just use that instead of building our own capacity?
Certainly in an era of what happens tomorrow morning, between midnight till morning, we're living in a world which is taking tomorrow's decision basis last night's things globally. Certainly, yes, we need and we really want integration up till polysilicon also. Why? Because see, unless you have control on supply chain till the point when no one else can actually squeeze you out if they wish to do, because of their sovereign challenge that they want to create for you as a country, or maybe because of other geopolitical pressures that can come out, really hard to say who's standing with whom in today's world. Better to look at full stack integration. Now, let's take an example. You spoke about China, like China has got enough of capacity. Of course, yes, they had enough of capacity for modules already, while we as a country were at around 25 gigawatt capacity 5 years back. China was already at 500 gigawatt plus capacity. The same was case with cell ingot wafer. But the moment we moved out this revolution of manufacturing things in India and going staged wise as a country from upstream to further upstream to a point whether we have started to talk at platform like that is India really looking at polysilicon, or can we really think of that? The answer is yes, certainly. Why? Because maybe ingot wafer 3-4 years, if we end up doing it, polysilicon, the dependency is on the silica, and that dependency is not circumvented within Chinese boundary. There are a lot of other countries, like Europe has enough of capacity to supply you the core material. US has that capacity. Many African countries have those capacity which can actually offer you the raw material which is required for a polysilicon manufacturing. all we need to do is to start creating that infrastructure. First is large power, generation units which can actually supply reliable power throughout, because 40% to 50% of cost of polysilicon is nothing but just power. If we really solve for it, and I can see that being solved of lately, it is taking some time because we are a country of 1.5 billion, and of course it takes time to move a needle out here, largely because of the population that we have. But having said so, polysilicon, like if you wish to set up, let's say 2 gigawatt, 5 gigawatt, it will never work. You need to have 20, 30, 50 gigawatt of single location scale for it to be first feasible financially. Second is, if you require power, you cannot afford to give power at, let's say 9 rupees, 8 rupees, it will never become viable. You have to have power at around 3.5 rupees to 4.5 rupees or closer to that range to be able to come out at cost parity with Chinese likes. Though because of inefficiencies and efficiency curve that we have to pass through as a country, it may take 1-2 years for us to reach there, but that should not be a problem. If you're looking at a 20-year horizon, 30-year horizon, we should not be much concerned about 1 year, 2 year kind of price disruptions. The interesting fact, if I want to share with you right here is, right, 5 years back, the competition to Indian manufacturers was not within India, it was largely because of imports from China, right? The price deltas at which we were looking at our cost curves, we were around 6 cents, 7 cents ahead or beyond the cost of Chinese. Today, if I look at, even in the worst of scenario, it's hardly about a cent or a two if we look at the pricing. And as we move ahead, as scale goes up and as integration moves up, we really see this.
So you are saying that if I'm importing a cell from China at say 6 to 7 cents right now, which I think is the price, domestic manufacturing is say 7 to 8 cents. Is that what you're saying?
Currently, if you look at cost curves, we are in the range of 7, 8 to 9 cents.
So it's only 10-15%.
But all we need is a lower cost of power there also, because here as well 25% of cost is nothing but energy. And as we increase the energy guzzling units, all you need is a support of infrastructure that can give you a lower cost of power, so that you can think of more manufacturing. So yes, poly to module very much possible, and it seems that with the conducive policy.
So what I'm getting from you is technology is not an issue. Investment is, and then access to energy, whether you get some subsidized or maybe it's passed on and there is an ALMM kind of thing which is anyways happening, so it all gets built into the price of the final cell or a module, and then maybe it will be 10-15% more expensive, but that is not a very high price to pay for the energy security that it provides.
Not that shit, but yes, because technology, if you look at, there are still some disruptions when you talk about getting technology in India. Every right and then we keep hearing about someone falling out on technology tie with some other company, and we see that this is not going to stop here. This may continue forever. So all you need to do is you need to keep leveraging by having multiple tie-ups, not just in a particular country, but out there in multiple countries. Cost will be 5-10% high, but then long run it pays off.
Understood. Thank you. One of the other things which our presentation covered was how the DISCOMs are strengthened in some ways because they are A, paying their dues on time, and B, and largely because of their AT&C reduces have come down, and because of access to funding from the state governments, PFC, RAC, state government guarantee, etc., is helping out. Kailash, the question for you is this sustainable? Because all of us have seen things go well for a long time and then suddenly it all breaks. And at the end of the day, DISCOM is really where the counterparty risk is there. This time it is, let me confess, has survived for a fairly long time. I remember Renew used to have challenges, some of the DISCOMs paying after 1 year, 1.5 years. So I'm sure this is a key risk that you look at. How do you see this panning out? Are you sleeping comfortably, or there are challenges that you see on this playing out in near future?
No, so given that DISCOMs have been paying on time for a significant period of time, now I think that risk, at least is to a large extent, has been addressed. The DISCOM health as a financial health situation, that remains a challenge, and that whatever steps need to be done to get that sorted still remain open, right? There is obviously DISCOM privatization, which has been like a 20-25-year-old topic, still not done. But I think that will be a miracle to see that if something can be done along for that, because despite everything, while they're paying on time, it's with the help of debt that they're taking. They still have losses, which are though lesser, but still they are being run quite inefficiently. Their entire collection system is a little bit broken. So to that extent, I would say that, we're not out of the woods completely. But, as a developer, what we have tried to do is move away from them. And obviously the industry is also in a way moved away from DISCOM. So to that extent, the scale of the problem has, come down quite significantly.
Got it.
So today, even if, the DISCOM stop paying for like 6 months, maybe it'll increase my receivable days by only 30, 35 days.
Got it. And let me come to Kuldeep. Your business model is completely devoid of any DISCOM because you don't sell anything to DISCOMs, which is good. The question that I have for you is, competitive intensity. Do you think that it's kind of an opportunity which a lot of people, maybe, some of them in this room are now catching up with, and therefore the C&I space, which is really the crux of your business, is kind of an opportunity picked up, and therefore is getting more competitive and difficult going forward?
I think there are definitely two truths. First is that the C&I space is really booming compared to the utility renewable space, which is growing at about 12% a year. C&I is growing at closer to 30% a year. So definitely C&I is seeing very fast growth. The natural corollary to very fast growth is you will have new players enter, you will have some players exit. And even today, it is a highly competitive market where we as the All India leader have only 14% market share. So I always state that this is a competitive business. Even the market leader only has about 14-15%. The next highest player is about 8-9%. So therefore, you would expect that you have some more competition. The good thing though is that as long as the overall sector grows a fair bit, the way I see it is that today we are more constrained by how much we can execute and at what pace, and not so much by customer demand. And in such situations where demand is outstripping supply, your profitability remains reasonably good. Got it.
Sandeep, next question for you is, because of this whole geopolitical risk and completely uncertain times, and since you run a fund, how do you see this, and especially in the context of power sector, both debt and equity, access to capital, right? And I would say debt, I would assume largely will be domestic, but equity can be domestic and international. How is it panning out? Are we seeing some challenges? We hear this narrative, FDI is going down, FPI is not happening, foreigners are not investing in India and all that. So from where you sit, how is it looking like, especially for the power sector?
So I think in the power sector, especially renewable sector, when we go to our international discussions within 𝙂𝙑, for example, right, over the last 12 to 18 months, actually India discussion has gained quite a bit of prominence, which was not the case earlier. Of course, US is doing quite well, Europe is doing quite well. But I think especially with respect to renewables, I think India is now at the center stage of discussions in boardrooms as to what's the strategy, how are you growing, and partly because of companies like CleanMax who actually opened up a new sector like C&I, right, which was relatively a smaller sector or rooftop mainly, but now it is in the mainstream and growing as fast as Kuldeep also mentioned. I think on the equity side, there are a lot of discussions happening. What we are also seeing on the ground that there is a lot of interest amongst players to actually invest in equity, and new players keep on coming, although there are a lot of people who are already there on the equity side. We saw the response to the Spring transaction that recently concluded with Aditya Birla Group and GIP actually acquiring it at an attractive valuation. I think in terms of capital availability, I think as long as the underlying projects are robust, as long as capital structures are correct, I don't think that you will find that the capital is not available. Capital will find its way, especially in places like India, which is one of the few shining example of growth in renewable sector. And then don't forget, we also have the domestic pool of capital, right? Every second renewable company is getting into listing, and I think generally there is, of course, exceptions aside, generally the response to renewable power listing, both on the C&I, we have CleanMax as an example, looking at where their share price is. We are actually seeing that a lot of domestic capital wants to take part in the equity capital stack of renewable companies. So I don't see that equity capital will remain dearth. Debt capital is a mixed bag, to be honest, because, for example, in complex FDRE projects, you'll be surprised to know that the leaders in debt for these projects are not the Indian banks, but a foreign bank, Stanchart, SMBCs, MUFGs. Those are the guys who are actually funding, because, frankly, these projects need some more learning to be translated to Indian banks, both private and public side. I think it is incumbent on us as developers also to give out, our perspective of how these technologies will actually work. Battery is a new technology. Integration of wind, solar is something which is yet to be done. So there, I think, if you're looking at a 500 gigawatt kind of capacity, most of the funding, 70 to 75% has to come from debt. So 25 to 30% equity, I'm not too worried about that. But I think debt is something which we really need to solve. If you're looking at 35 lakh crores of capex, 20 to 25 lakh crore has to come from the debt system. There, I think we really need to do some more work.
It kind of is a sense of deja vu. Earlier, maybe 10, 15 years back, we used to say, we have to build roads and the regular solar and all that. We came that through pretty well. I'm sure this also we will be able to manage. We are left with only 4 to 5 minutes, and I would, love if any audience member has a question which you would like to ask. We maybe have time for 2 or so questions. Okay, I think we don't have. You can think about it, and maybe I'll take one more question before you kind of come back. So, Kailash, maybe I'll come to you for a question. Largely in terms of, and Sandeep did mention about this whole FDRE thing and lack of funding, or not lack, but more difficulty. How are you? Because it's suddenly gotten more complex. It's not easy to analyze the cash flows. It was very simple, must-run status, regular. The only risk was pretty much the counterparty risk. And the execution risk was not much. Are we getting into a space which is getting much more complex, or maybe people who are outside see those risks and maybe you guys have kind of worked it out?
Yeah. So, to Sandeep's point, I think debt availability really not a challenge at all. I think, we have been in this market for almost 15 years. And availability has never been better. And typically we would have a situation where, some markets are closed, others are open, and, if you were diversified, you could manage. But at this point in time, you have DFIs, you have foreign commercial banks, the Indian public sector banks, private banks, the bond market. Pretty much everybody is, willing to finance projects. In fact, right now, given the transmission constraints, there is a situation where there are, multiple lenders on the same asset, because, there are not that many assets available to finance. And obviously, banks also have to show growth in their lending book. So I don't see, at least at this point in time, any challenges. Obviously, over a longer period of time, we'll have to see how the market matures. But, given that, there is a healthy mix of lenders overall who are now financing these sort of complex projects, we are hoping that that entire knowledge base does get built, and that makes it, sort of, as you said, the same path which we traveled over the last 10, 12 years, we continue to be on that journey. See, the sector, the renewable energy, the power sector, obviously it's a very important strategic sector from an India point of view. And given all, geopolitical situation in the world, energy security has never been more important, right? And we actually saw a situation where there was a blockade, and it continues, and there is a situation where gas wasn't available. There was challenges on coal stocks could be there. Anything could happen in future. So I think having our own energy sources through renewable energy, FDRE type of projects, I think the entire ecosystem, even battery manufacturing, will eventually move to India, and there will be ALMM maybe on batteries also, battery cells, and pretty much then we would be self-reliant in terms of our energy requirement.
Great. I think on that positive note, we will bring this. Oh, there are some questions. Okay, we can take only one because we are running short on time. Yeah, can someone give the mic, please?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. I'm Abhishek from ProStarM Infosystems Limited. I have question related to BESS. We have heard that recently PLI has been announced on the grid scale ACC as well. But on the technology front, we are aware that the limitation is up to majorly related to China. And we are seeing many of the projects getting stalled, recently being the 40,000 crore of project getting stalled. So how do you look at it? How will we get the technology? Though PLI is coming, even the PLI 1 and 2 is still not yet, it's still not successful. So how do you think about this particular part? And how will we get the technology for coming up with the manufacturing in India?
Kailash, could you get that question?
Yeah, it's manufacturing technology, right? That's your question, correct?
BESS, yeah.
BESS, yeah.
Yeah, BESS, yeah. Again, these were the same concerns during ALMM 1-2. So PLI is not what sort of drives a lot of investment into manufacturing, because PLI ends up being a very small component of the overall saving or subsidy element, if you may want to call that. It's largely ALMM, which gave India, the capacity which we saw in the presentation done earlier by Jatin. But essentially, ALMM means that, there is a total ban. Any duty, CVD, whatever you call it, it's only a temporary measure. But once there's ALMM, then at least we know that there is a non-tariff barrier which can stand the test of time, and that enables expansion in that area of manufacturing. Now, to your point on technology, I would say that, technology is always a challenge. China refuses to share technology many times, and you just have to find ways to get access to it. Eventually, they do give in, and once the ALMM is announced, I don't think there's much to be done after that in terms of not exporting technology. But yeah, Abhishek, you want to add?
So I agree with you that there are not alone PLI can actually drive a lot of investment, but it actually work as a catalyst, and likes of ALMM is something that really ensures that demand is out there. On the specific question of technology, it has always been the challenge. It was not just alone in module, it was not only tough, but in cell ingot wafer we have been facing this throughout the journey, and so far as a country we've been able to talk about 70 gigawatt of cell capacity, ingot capacity 50-60 gigawatt wafer also, and dream of polysilicon, because technologies outside China's are available, but then they are available at a cost, right? If you look at 10-20 years of horizon, it really makes sense, but in the short term it may be a little difficult for someone to increase their levelized cost of storage or levelized cost of electricity. So you have to keep negotiating with our cross-border partners. You have to keep discussing with them. End of the day, even if you are given a technology which is a gen before, let's say today Gen 4 and 5 is working in China, even if you get an access to Gen 3 where there are no general restrictions because the technology is outdated, but with an improvement in 6-12 months of time, you can actually reach out the Gen 4 and be efficient enough. So there are multiple such routes which are available, wherein we can really create those technological hubs in India, and we see that happening. Maybe next 4-5 years we will see the real outcomes when there are a pool of companies will be manufacturing either with hybrid capacity technology or with homegrown technology, and we firmly believe in that.
Yeah, great, Abhishek. We will have to wrap it up. I'm seeing Revati already giving me looks. She has the next panel to moderate. So great. Thanks everyone. Thanks audience. And we will move to the next.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, and all our panelists for an engaging and thought-provoking discussion on India's energy future. As a token of our appreciation, we will now felicitate our panelists. May I request Sri Sachin Gupta to kindly join us for the presentation of the mementos. May I request Sri Kuldeep Jain to accept our token of appreciation for your time and valuable perspectives. Can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you. I request Sandeep Lakhanpal to kindly come forward and accept our token of appreciation for joining us today and enriching today's discussion. Can we keep the round of applause going, please? Thank you. And may now request Sri 𝙄𝙣𝙛𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙧 to join us for a small gesture of our appreciation for your time and key insights. And finally, may I now request Sri Abhishek Parikh to accept a small token of our gratitude for joining us today and sharing your valuable perspectives. I request our moderator and panelists to remain on stage for a group photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, another warm round of applause, please, for the panel. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall reset the stage and resume with the second panel discussion in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin our second panel discussion. I request you all to take your seats, please. We now turn to transport infrastructure, the network that enables trade, mobility, connectivity, and regional development. To set the context, I invite 𝙄𝙣𝙛𝙧𝙧𝙪𝙘𝙪, Director, CareEdge Ratings, to present key insights on the theme, Reimagining Transport Infrastructure, the next frontier of connectivity. Mr. Desai, the stage is all yours.
So we are about to begin. So everyone is requested to assemble in the room. Yeah. So yeah. Good evening all. It is said that next era of transport infrastructure shall be defined not by scale of assets built, but by connectivity and efficiency they enable. With this context, let me begin with today's presentation on reimagining transport infrastructure, which is next frontier of connectivity. If we look at the key messages, transport infrastructure focus is shifting from asset creation to logistics efficiency, multimodal integration, and private capital. Road sector growth is moderating both in terms of award and execution. Therefore, revamping concession models and state-led capex are critical. CareEdge Ratings estimates road InvIT AUM to exceed 4 trillion by FY27, therefore unlocking growth capital for India. Investment and appetite in road sector is expected to remain buoyant, supported by mature tariff setting process, rising non-aero revenue and longer concession period. Rail and logistics reform will determine the success of multimodal connectivity, and finally, de-risking PPP framework and addressing execution bottlenecks are critical for attracting the long-term infrastructure capital. Now we will look at India's transport infrastructure, journey of last decade and ambition. As seen in this slide, India has significantly expanded national highways. Electrification has also been completed. Dedicated freight corridor, both eastern and western, are operational. Operational airport capacity has also doubled. Port capacity has also significantly expanded. Resultantly, global rank of India in Logistics Performance Index has improved from 54 to 39. The message is clear. India has built backbone of transport infrastructure. Going forward, the challenges will be to enhance connectivity, improve efficiency, and attract private capital. Let's compare India's infrastructure on global arena, beginning with the roads, where India has established scale with a density comparable with the US and China. Comparing mode of finance, India is better placed with adoption of hybrid model, which is a mix of PPP and EPC, with an emphasis on asset monetization. However, there is a need to build access control expressway and aligning connectivity with ports and DFC. Coming to the railways, where reach is comparable with US and China, but the next requirement is speed and PPP. Comparing with China, which has built the large rail high-speed network of 50,000 kilometers, it is pertinent to mention that less than 10% is economically profitable, and therefore India needs to adopt a caution while expanding its high-speed rail network. Coming to the airports, where there is a mature tariff setting process in India and PPP concession is fully stabilized, and which has resulted into the growth in airport infrastructure. Coming to the seaports, China's port cargo throughput is significantly higher than India. If we look at top 30 world's container port, 8 are from China and India has only 3 ports. Therefore, there is a need for capacity building for seaports and enhancing competitiveness. Overall infrastructure spend stood at 3.4% of GDP for India, which is somewhere between US and China. Now we will look at the sectoral trend. We will begin with the roads. Adoption of HAM model and success thereof has resulted into significant addition and significant awarding of as well as execution for the road sector. However, the pace of execution has steadily declined from 34 km in FY24 to 25 km in FY26, and which is expected to decline further to 21 km in FY27. This is on account of increased execution woes and sustained decline in awarding. Competition has also intensified in the sector, which has resulted into the perceived risk of quality of construction. Therefore, revising BOT toll concession and introducing toll plus annuity concession are necessary to reignite growth for national highway. If we look at the capital outlay, it is estimated at around 5 lakh crore for road sector. However, the growth in state capex to outpace central, marking a structural shift. Yet, share of PPP is low in state, which is a cause of concern. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu and Odisha are prominent states having a higher capital outlay in the roads. Moving to the asset monetization. Asset under management for InvIT for India stood at close to 7.5 lakh crore. However, roads having a lion's share of 45%. If we see in this chart, AUM under roads InvIT grew significantly from 1 trillion to 3.12 trillion in FY26, and it is expected to exceed 4 trillion in FY27. Mature toll asset, NHI asset monetization and pool of operational HAM are key factors. However, valuation multiple of HAM projects expected operational after 25 is expected to be moderate on account of high leverage, aggressive bidding and lower inflation indexation benefit. This along with limited pool of mature toll road is expected to moderate the growth of InvIT going forward except for NHAI. Coming to the airports, which has also witnessed significant capex cycle. One capex cycle of close to 1 lakh crore was completed from FY22 to FY26, which comprised of 3 greenfield airports including Navi Mumbai. Now, the next capex cycle of FY27 to FY30 is largely pertaining to the brownfield expansion to enhance the connectivity. Financial risk profile of airports is expected to remain resilient due to steady tariff revision, healthy non-aero revenue and longer concession period. Moving to the seaports and logistics, where this seaports has witnessed a transformation with significant addition in ports capacity. Container volume has also grown at a CAGR of 5% over a decade, despite geopolitical factors. It is on account of increasing trend of containerization. Operational efficiency has also significantly improved, marked by reducing vessel turnaround time by 41%. Share of PPP has also increased to 66%. In port sector, growth hinges on doubling of this capacity and increasing efficiency. Moving to the most important slide of this presentation on this logistics infrastructure. As seen in this exhibit 11, railway capex has grown by 11% to 2.65 lakh crore in FY26. Grade A warehousing stock has also increased to 300 million square feet. Going forward, significant capital outlay in Grade A warehousing, ICDs and Gati Shakti cargo terminal is expected to get that envisaged benefit on the DFC capex, which is estimated at a 90,000 crore. If we look at the exhibit on the 10th exhibit on the left side, we have plotted the port container throughput, rail container throughput and rail coefficient. Rail coefficient is measured by the rail cargo, container cargo transported through rail divided by the port total volume, container volume handled at the port. As seen in this slide, this rail coefficient has steadily increased to 40% in FY26. This is on account of connectivity established at Mundra port, and now DFC is going to be also connected to JNPT in March 2026. This is expected to increase the rail coefficient further and already transit time from Mundra has reduced significantly. Now going forward, the transit time with from JNPT to onwards, Dadri is also expected to reduce. And therefore, this is expected to reduce the logistics cost for India. Coming to some of the flip side, while there are a lot of positives with the DFC being operational, the actual speed of train is less than design speed. Second, there are issues in first mile, last mile connectivity. Rail freight is regulated by Ministry of Railways and their haulage charges are also higher. These three factors limits the potential of DFC. Government of India has announced multimodal logistics park on a PPP basis to improve the connectivity. However, both execution and operational risk remains high in MMLP. And finally, PPP is untested in railways. Therefore, reforms in rail and logistics are critical to build multimodal connectivity. With this, we will look at the key ponderables. Is lender or developer confidence revived in BOT toll concession model upbeat? Are scaling rail and logistics PPP activities gathering momentum? Will InvIT bring diversification across asset classes and investor categories? First mile, last mile connectivity, has the focus shifted yet? And finally, multimodal integration for logistics efficiency, is this a distinct reality? With this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Desai, for that concise overview of the evolving transport infrastructure landscape. We will now have our second panel discussion of the evening. Moderating the discussion is Ms. Revati Kasture, Executive Director, CareEdge Ratings, who will guide our panelists through a conversation on the future of connectivity and the next phase of India's transport transformation. I now invite our distinguished panelists to join us on stage. Please welcome Shri Ajendra Kumar Agarwal. He is the Chairman and Managing Director of GR Infrastructure Projects Limited. With nearly 4 decades of experience in the infrastructure sector, he has played a pivotal role in shaping GRIL's growth and strategic direction. Known for his hands-on leadership and operational excellence, he has successfully led large-scale infrastructure projects across India while championing safety, quality compliance, and sustainable development. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Next, please welcome Shri Samuel Joseph, Deputy Managing Director, National Bank for Financing, Infrastructure and Development. Mr. Joseph brings more than 3 decades of experience across banking, infrastructure finance, trade finance, and project lending. Having held leadership roles at NABFID, IDBI Bank, and Exim Bank, he brings deep expertise in financing the infrastructure that powers India's development trajectory. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation to be with us here today. Now, please welcome Shri Gaurav Chandna, Executive Director and Joint CEO of Vertis Infrastructure Trust. He is a prominent voice in infrastructure investing and the InvIT space, with a strong focus on long-term value creation. He has been associated with Vertis since its inception and has played a central role in building and scaling the platform. He brings a blend of investor and operator perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Chandna, for joining us today. Over to you, Ms. Kasture, to begin the discussion. Thank you.
So I know this session is between you and your dinner, but I assure you it will be an interesting one. India has, as shown in the presentations before also, India has built infrastructure at an unprecedented scale. But connectivity does not ensure competitiveness. So the real economic dividend will come when we start seeing the benefits of this infrastructure or these transport assets in an integrated network with lowering of logistic costs or improving reliability and so on and so forth. We have spent about 3% of the GDP on infrastructure development. However, the center's capex will have to be supported by private sector also investing as much in the road ahead for this to make us make a very long-term sustainable process. And therefore the questions that we are facing today is whether we are building enough and whether we are building it in place, in the right place. How can we create the necessary frameworks or conditions or policy frameworks to give this process an impetus, a further impetus? And can private sector participation enhance the competitiveness of the sector? Today we have three very esteemed panelists joining us for this session. And I will start my first question with you, Mr. Agarwal. You've been at the forefront of this entire transportation build-up over the last 3 decades. And you saw in the presentation that Maulish presented, in the last 3 years, we've seen a certain slowdown in awarding of projects. NHAI has recently come up with a revised BOT toll framework that seeks to address a few pain points like traffic shortfall and all. But do you see this revised framework is going to be useful and it will result in more awards?
थैंक यू मैम। सबसे पहले जहाँ तक गवर्नमेंट का ये जो इनिशिएशन लिया है न्यू फ्रेमवर्क का, उसमें काफ़ी कुछ इम्प्रूव हुआ है। जो इन्वेस्टमेंट की जो अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली है काफ़ी ह्यूज है, लेकिन अभी भी काफ़ी कुछ किया जाना बाकी है। अभी भी अपन देखेंगे तो जो डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन मैकेनिज्म है, स्टेट सपोर्ट एग्रीमेंट है, ये सब की कमी की वजह से अभी मुझे ये लगता है कि आने वाले समय में भी जो कंसेशनर की या जो प्राइवेट पार्टिसिपेशन की जो एनर्जी है जो उसमें कमी रहेगी। अगर गवर्नमेंट इन सब चीज़ों को अल्टीमेटली जो इतने बड़े इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलप होते हैं तो बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस आते हैं। इंडिया में ROW का हमेशा से चैलेंजेस रहा, लैंड से रिलेटेड, और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में आप देखेंगे कि लैंड की जो ह्यूज रिक्वायरमेंट आती है। इंडिया में किसी भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को डेवलप करने के लिए लैंड एक मेजर चैलेंज बना रहता है। अपन जब भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को डेवलप करते हैं, ऑल्दो गवर्नमेंट उसके अवार्ड करने से पहले बहुत कुछ उस पर वर्किंग करती है, काफ़ी कुछ लैंड के ऊपर एग्रीगेशन के ऊपर काफ़ी कुछ वर्क करती है, पर उसके बावजूद भी लोकल इश्यूज जो बाद में डेवलप होते हैं उनको चैलेंज करने के लिए जो डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन सिस्टम है इसको इम्प्रूवमेंट किया जाना चाहिए। ऑल्दो जो सॉवरेन फंड्स के लिए जो जिस तरह से अपॉर्चुनिटी नए BOT फ्रेमवर्क में जिस तरह से लाई गई है, जो टेक्निकल रिक्वायरमेंट जो पहले सॉवरेन फंड के लिए भी थी उसको रिमूव किया गया है, वो एक अच्छा इनिशिएशन है। बट मुझे ये लगता है अभी भी बहुत कुछ किया जाना बाकी।
But whatever has been done in this particular phase, do you think that it's going to at least release some of the pain points that we saw and therefore increase the awards? या आपको नहीं लगता ये होगा?
अभी भी अगर अपन देखें तो गवर्नमेंट के जो अवार्ड्स है वो काफ़ी डाउन हुए। जैसे अभी प्रेजेंटेशन में दिखाया था, के प्रोजेक्ट्स में भी काफ़ी स्लो डाउन हुआ है। अवार्ड में जो एग्जीक्यूशन का जो स्लो डाउन है मेनली इसकी वजह से कि अवार्ड में ही स्लो डाउन है। अब गवर्नमेंट जब प्राइवेट पार्टिसिपेशन को लेकर आना चाहती है, मुझे ये लगता है जब प्राइवेट पार्टिसिपेशन में जब गवर्नमेंट एक तरह से दो पार्टी को देखती है, जो प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट है उसको जिस तरह से लिया जाता है कि दो पार्टनर है, जैसे पीपीपी में पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप है। मुझे पर्सनली ये लगता है कि इसमें गवर्नमेंट को पेरेंटिंग करनी चाहिए, न कि पार्टनरशिप। गवर्नमेंट को कुछ जब टेबल पे कुछ रखती है तो वापस लेने की नहीं सोचनी चाहिए। इसमें गवर्नमेंट की खुद की सक्सेस जब भी होगी जब जितने भी पब्लिक पार्टनर्स हैं वो सक्सेस होंगे। अब बीओटी में जिस तरह से ट्रैफिक शॉर्टफॉल को जिस तरह से एड्रेस किया गया है, उसके साथ में उसके एडवांटेज को भी गवर्नमेंट ने उसका एडवांटेज लेने में पार्टिसिपेशन किया। अगर शॉर्टफॉल को समय के साथ में एक्सटेंशन के साथ में जिस तरह से एड्रेस किया गया है उसमें कुछ कमी रह गई है। अगर ये फाइनेंशियली सपोर्ट के साथ में होता तो बेटर होता, और इसमें ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा सक्सेस स्टोरी बननी चाहिए। एक बार अगर कोई भी जो सिस्टम है सक्सेस होता है, इनिशिया बनता है, तो उसके बाद में कुछ रेस्ट्रिक्शन लगाए जा सकते हैं, पर इनिशियली नए जो बीओटी मॉडल्स में है इसमें और ज़्यादा इम्प्रूवमेंट की रिक्वायरमेंट है।
So taking the same thread for the road infrastructure ahead, I turn to you, Gaurav, and my question to you is that, as shown in the presentation also, we had lower awards for the last 3 years. Most toll road assets are actually monetized. The HAM assets are carrying a higher leverage, and so they may not be as attractive. So what would be the strategies for growth, because you run an InvIT?
Of course, this is a question which has been asked from me several times over the last 5-6 months. But see, one has to consider the fact that highways, along with the railways and energy for that matter, continues to be sectors which have the highest capital formation in the country. Correct? While, of course, there's another school of thought that project awards has slowed down substantially compared to what the run rate was a couple of years back, which is obviously true. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, there is a significant number of projects which have been developed over the last 5 years, which are still residing with NHAI, which is mostly the expressways, which we keep on hearing about, whether it is Amritsar Jamnagar or Delhi Mumbai Expressway, etc., which will most likely come up for monetization a couple of years down the line. Okay? And I also believe that whatever slowdown we are seeing right now is temporary in nature, primarily driven by challenges in both right-of-way land acquisition as well as execution challenges, because the type of projects which are now being developed, highway projects, are no longer plain vanilla projects. Okay? And there are a lot of structures which are involved all over the place, because the easy stretches were all made in the past. Going forward, it would naturally tend to be more complex, etc. And of course, there's a learning curve which is involved till that time. And I'm sure, given how strong the focus is of the government and of the ministry, we would soon overcome those challenges. Having said that, in the near term, you're absolutely right. I think a significant portion of the pipeline does come from HAM projects, and both the supply as well as transaction activity on hybrid annuity projects continues to be robust. Now, of course, what may happen in the intermediate phase is, from InvIT standpoint, the portfolio composition may shift more in favor of annuity projects, which is not necessarily bad, because there's certain stability which annuity projects lend to your portfolio. But that also comes with its own set of challenges, because there have been concerns generally raised by the market around quality aspect, primarily stemming from the fact that a lot of the bidding which has happened, I would say, since 2023 has happened at a substantial discount to NHI cost estimates, etc. Of course, the solution to that is one, as acquirers, you do your work thoroughly, plus the fact that I would say, tend to believe that a lot of the InvITs, highways InvITs in the market have also improved their capability substantially on the operating side, plus the scale also imparts some bit of ability to cushion whatever surprises we may see on the quality side. Of course, one needs to be cautious with respect to taking any sort of binary risk, but risks which potentially could easily be absorbed or easily assessed at the time of diligencing are probably the risks which one can think of taking.
Okay, so you remain optimistic in that. We heard Mr. Gautam Adani some time back, and he said, we have to build for the ecosystem. India as an infrastructure has to build for an ecosystem. Definitely this requires trillions of dollars or lakhs of rupees. And Mr. Samuel, you come from that financing ecosystem. Do you feel that India has the capital to finance the huge infrastructure outlay that it requires, or are we going to rely more and more on global capital? How do you see this panning out?
Thank you, Kasturi. And well, I think in the opening address, Mr. Pandya ji mentioned the number of 770 trillion that will be required over the next 2 decades for building infrastructure in this country. If you look at this number on a standalone basis, this is a very humongous number. Because if you look at what all the commercial banks put together and all the NBFCs put together have financed for infrastructure in our country is just 35 lakh crore, 35 trillion rupees. We should also be conscious that we are already at a credit deposit ratio of over 80%. Deposits are not growing. So there has to be a combination of various factors. I'll not say that let's say even over the next 5 years, what is required about, let's say 100 trillion rupees can come only from the domestic sector, or it has to come only from the global sector. It has to be a combination of factors. What I mean by this is, I think banks and institutions will have to look at very innovative ways of generating resources. Gone are the days, now for instance, infra developers, road developers for instance, are developing a project and then flipping it into an InvIT or selling it to somebody else and generating fresh capital. So this model, the infra developers have perfected it. But infra lenders can never expect or never should hold these assets for 25 years in their books. We will have to work on strategies like securitization, pass-through certificates, in order to move it from our balance sheet and move to a assets under management concept. A lot of bond market is another one where loans can move to the bond market. I think it's already moving to some extent. InvITs we have looked at many road InvITs are already raising bonds because it perfectly fits their risk profile also, being fixed rate. And even in the recent RBI guidelines, if you see, while loans, they have said that amortization of the loans have to be more or less uniform with the cash flows, they've exempted bonds. So this will push more and more from the loan market to the bond market. So it has to be a combination of strategies. And also global capital, I think we have just scratched the surface. We are not doing them a favor by putting our assets to them. Neither are they doing us a favor by investing in our country. I think it's a business case which we are confidently presenting, and I think it will be a combination of factors which will lead to financing this infrastructure requirement in our country.
Great. So innovation in finance is something that you're kind of propagating in terms of recycling it, even from the lender's perspective. Agarwal ji, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the real economic dividend arises when transport assets function as an integrated network. And you are in your organization also building up multimodal logistic parks. So what are the key opportunities for private developers in this segment, And what are the risks that need to be addressed to make this model commercially attractive? Because today we're not seeing so many developers getting into this segment.
इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में कोई भी एसेट है वो लॉन्ग टर्म पे देखी जानी चाहिए, शॉर्ट टर्म पे या मीडियम टर्म में नहीं देखी जा सकती। अभी आज के दिन किसी भी सिटी का नाम ले लो आप, जो मेजर सिटी है उसको टीयर 1 की नहीं बात कर रहा मैं, इवन टीयर 2, टीयर 3 सिटीज, आप किसी भी सिटी में जाके देखें कि ट्रैफिक क्या नॉर्मल है, क्या कोई भी इंसान अपने टाइम पर अपने ऑफिस या घर पहुंच पा रहा है? उसकी वजह क्या है? वजह है कि मल्टीपल ट्रैफिक, मल्टीपल कैटेगरी ऑफ ट्रैफिक एक साथ मूवमेंट कर रहा है। सुबह जब अपन ऑफिस आते हैं तो उसी इसमें गुड्स सप्लाई भी साथ में चल रही है, ट्रैफिक जाम है। तो आपको आने वाले समय के लिए लॉजिस्टिक पार्क डेवलप करने ही पड़ेंगे, जहां पर लॉन्ग रूट का जो ट्रैफिक है वो वहां के अगेन जो नाइट में सप्लाई चेन मैनेजमेंट हो। ये आने वाले समय की ह्यूज रिक्वायरमेंट है। जो आज के दिन वेयर हाउस बने हुए हैं, आप ये देखेंगे कैटेगरी जो ए ग्रेड वेयर हाउस है वहाँ ह्यूज गैप है। अभी जो जिस तरह से भी, क्योंकि जब सप्लाई ही नहीं है तो जहाँ चाहे वो कैटेगरी बी है चाहे कैटेगरी सी है, वेयर हाउस से काम हो रहा है। लेकिन जैसे ही गवर्नमेंट का रेगुलेशन कंट्रोल बढ़ेगा, कैटेगरी ए वेयर हाउस की रिक्वायरमेंट बढ़ेगी, ट्रैफिक रेगुलेट होगा, तो आपको स्मॉलर व्हीकल के द्वारा आपको गुड सप्लाई चेन डेवलप करना होगा। आने वाले समय में नेक्स्ट 5 इयर्स में आप देखिएगा कि जो लॉजिस्टिक पार्क है वो एक नई सक्सेस स्टोरी बनने वाली है। आपको हर सिटी के बाहर नए लॉजिस्टिक पार्क बनाने पड़ेंगे, लेकिन अगेन चैलेंज लैंड की अवेलेबिलिटी का रहेगा। लार्जर लैंड एक्विजिशन गवर्नमेंट को देना होगा, उसी के बेस पे ये सक्सेस स्टोरी बनेगी। लेकिन अभी अगर आज के दिन देखें तो लॉजिस्टिक पार्ट पे जो कनेक्टिविटी जो है वो गवर्नमेंट के पार्ट पे रहेगी, चाहे वो रेलवे से हो चाहे हाईवे नेटवर्क हो, इस तरह से डेवलप हो कि सिटी के साथ में प्रॉपरली नेटवर्किंग हो। और ये एक चैलेंज रहेगा क्योंकि रोड एंड रेलवे दोनों एक साथ में लॉजिस्टिक पार्क पे लेके आना एक नया चैलेंज रहेगा, लेकिन आने वाले समय के लिए एक बड़ी अपॉर्चुनिटी है। अभी आज के दिन इतने लॉजिस्टिक पार्क डेवलप नहीं हुए हैं अभी तक, लेकिन नेक्स्ट 10 इयर्स में ये स्टोरी चेंज होगी।
तो when we speak to developers, we also get to hear that multiple approvals for this also is a huge challenge. So how do you see that?
इसमें जो गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस रिक्वायर्ड रहेगा, जो मल्टीपल स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं, लैंड क्लियरेंस, कंस्ट्रक्शन के रिलेटेड, एनवायरनमेंट से रिलेटेड, फॉरेस्ट से रिलेटेड, जितने भी जो क्लियरेंसेस जो लॉजिस्टिक पार्क को चाहिए वो एक सिंगल विंडो अगर गवर्नमेंट करेगी तो निश्चित तौर पे ये सेक्टर बूम करेगा।
Mr. Samuel, RBI introduced the partial credit guarantee framework, and NAPFID was actually the driving force behind that policy. This is a very important initiative to broaden the bond market. It has been close to an year that since this from a policy perspective is in place, but we're not seeing transactions on ground. So what are the factors that are holding back these transactions from happening, and what additional measures do you feel are necessary to provide a better mechanism?
Well, I should add here You mentioned that NAPFID was at the forefront of these policy changes. CareEdge was the first to rate the first transaction, that is city gas distribution
gas,
unit.
yes.
Of course, they didn't come to the market. This is again an extension of the previous answer what I gave. We will have to work towards moving it from the loan market to the bond market, make it attractive, make it AA plus as per the IRDA guidelines. RBI revised guidelines on partial credit enhancement was just the first step. If you look at it, the IRDA guidelines, investment guidelines revision have just come about a month or so back. But transactions didn't happen. We should keep in mind that a partial credit enhancement is for a completed project where a loan, a bank loan is already sitting. We need to refinance a bank loan with a bond, and bond is a market instrument. Unfortunately, in the last 6 months, the bond market has moved very erratically. Maybe it has already factored in a 50 bips repo rate hike as markets always factor in. Whereas the loan markets, after the 50 bips repo rate cut in the first half of last year, have been very soft even now. And many of these infra developers have got repo linked loans. So I feel unless the economics works, that the bond market or as I see it immediately, the loan market may become more expensive with the repo rates going up rather than the bond markets coming down. So there could be some parity in the economics, and then we should see some deals happening.
But the arbitrage between the loan and the bond market is something that is a very crucial factor for the deals happening. Even the credit quality jump, you mentioned about a transaction, it went from single A to AA plus. That itself provides a very significant, jump up to, the rating, and therefore the raising, cost at which the bond can be raised.
Unfortunately, I should admit here, I don't know how many bankers are here, there is hardly any difference in pricing between an A and a AA in the loan market. Whereas a bond, there is a clear difference. So when we refinance a AA with a AA bond pricing, A's in the loan market, A also attracts the same pricing level. So risk pricing in the loan market is not as efficient as it happens in real markets like the bond market.
Okay. So I think Mr. Samuel was mentioning about, the IRDA regulations being changed very recently. And this is one of the things that I keep grappling with, Gaurav, for some time now, that why is it that, international pension funds, whether it is, from countries like Canada, come here, invest in infrastructure assets, but our own pension funds or infrastructure companies are not yet really ready to do that. So, my question to you is that how can we get this money of pension and insurance into the infra assets and specifically to the InvIT assets also?
So I would say a lot of this is to do with the comfort zones and inertia, because if you look at the global pension funds, at least globally, they have been investing in infrastructure space for more than a couple of decades. As far as their India journey is concerned, that is probably short of a decade, except for I think 1 or 2 investments which happened more than 10 years back. Bulk of the global pension fund money has come into infra over the last 5 to 7 years. So there is a global expertise which already resided within that category of investors. However, domestic pension capital, or even for that matter the provident fund capital, was never open to looking beyond only, if I may say so, the traditional asset classes, which would largely, I would say, large portion would be debt and all large cap equities, etc. And that too in a very, very limited or restricted manner. Plus the fact that domestic regulations have also been far more tighter as far as both pension and your insurance money is concerned, which is both good and bad, because if you look at our regulatory view across board, it has always been in the favor of securing than trying to maximize returns, especially in these categories. Now, of course, some beginning has been made. EPFO has invested in a couple of InvITs, so have the insurance companies started investing in. However, those are all pretty small amounts compared to the overall balance sheets of these companies, and they are still looking to work within those guidelines of 3% caps, etc., which have been stipulated by the regulator. Will things change over a period of time? Hopefully, yes, because as sector matures more and more, as the industry, investors, as well as regulators see or judge the performance of InvITs and REITs both over a longer period of time, I'm sure more capital would be attracted to this segment. But I think just to shake up that old philosophy of investment or old way of working will take obviously time, and I think rightfully so, because ultimately these are custodians of long-term money of individuals. So better to be safe than sorry, I may say so. And of course, another big difference is that all of these global pension funds, whenever they are making investments, they are all very sizable investments, both in terms of quantum as well as amount of stake which they hold in the investee companies, and hence which comes along with very substantial governance rights and the ability to influence decisions within those firms, whether it is corporate entity or InvITs, etc. And when any of the domestic funds are investing, and in fact, I would extend the argument to even other forms of domestic private capital, be it the family offices or the mutual funds, for that matter, they are all taking significant, or I would say small minority stakes, which doesn't come with any sort of board rights or governance rights, etc. So it would definitely be a gradual journey, but we are hopeful that these pools of capital should also start expanding over a period of time.
Thank you for that.
If I can just supplement Gaurav, I think this is the most important piece or the block what has to fall in place for infra financing. If you look at the quantum of funds available with insurance pension funds, it is 130 trillion rupees, and growing at double the deposit growth is the funds under management with the insurance and pension funds. So we are just scratching the surface in channelizing this long-term money. Of course, I completely agree with Gaurav. Safety is more important than that delta in return. Unlike a mutual fund manager who chases a return and willing to take a little incremental risk, a provident fund manager is not going to do that. And that is where I think it is mostly the fear of the unknown. If a Canadian pension fund can invest in India, I think you framed it right, can make a delta and what they consider as safe or relatively safe, I think it is high time that we shun this fear of the unknown and embrace financing. These are completed projects with stable cash flows. I think rating agencies have a big job in doing this. Your PD data, especially for infra projects, completed infra projects, tells the story completely black and white with numbers. I think this is the story we need to take to the insurance and pension companies, and saying that this is a safe asset class and this eminently suits your long-term requirement for funds.
And I think just one last point on this. Another driver which could enable more pension and insurance money flowing into the sector is a greater number of InvITs, because I think for them diversification is of paramount importance. And also if in future credible REIT and InvIT indices come into play, because then it becomes a relatively easier decision making for these guys or this segment. And because today, if let's say hypothetically somebody has to invest into an InvIT, amongst the publicly listed space, there are only a handful, 5 or 6 of them. Okay? So from an insurance capital point of view, it may not be sufficient or adequate diversification.
No, that is a valid point, Gaurav. Today there may not be sufficient numbers, but I'm sure that, as we build the ecosystem, there will be. And, to Mr. Samuel's point, the fear of the unknown is a very aptly put, phrase for this, because if you look at PD data for rating agencies, and I'm not specifically talking about a agency, and our data is definitely the best in the industry, but if I look at PD data for a single A paper, it is less than 0.4 on a 5-year period. For a double A is no less than 0.2, for a triple A is less than 0.05. So we're really, talking of numbers which are very robust. Post, of course, the, IBC, NCLT, QR processes which the Indian financial system did go through over the last decade or so. Turning back to, Mr. Agarwal, and a question is, in the presentation which Maulesh made, he said that, there is a huge opportunity in state projects. And, how do you really see that, what are the reforms that are necessary to make these projects really attractive on a PPP basis? Because counterparty risk is still something that we see as monitorable in these projects.
स्टेट लेवल पे जनरली पीपीपी प्रोजेक्ट में जो सबसे बड़ा इशू है ट्रांसपेरेंसी का और फाइनेंशियली डिसिप्लिन का। जो भी प्रोजेक्ट होते हैं उसके अंदर जो भी बाद में जो चेंज ऑफ स्कोप आते हैं या वाट एवर रीजन जो फाइनेंशियल इम्प्लीकेशंस आते हैं उनको एड्रेस करना बहुत ज़रूरी है। स्टेट इन जनरल में प्रोजेक्ट अवार्ड होने के बाद में जो फाइनेंशियल इम्प्लीकेशन आते हैं उसके ऊपर वर्क नहीं करते हैं, उसकी वजह से प्रोजेक्ट जनरली अनवायबल हो जाते हैं। अपन किसी भी इनविट का या प्रोजेक्ट की जब मोनेटाइजेशन की बात आती है तो कोई भी इनविट या कोई भी इंस्टीट्यूट उन प्रोजेक्ट्स को लेने में इंटरेस्ट नहीं रखता है। उसकी वजह यही है कि जो फाइनेंशियल डिसिप्लिन, फाइनेंशियल ट्रांसपेरेंसी जो चाहिए स्टेट से, वो आपको अवेलेबल नहीं है। अगर फाइनेंशियली डिसिप्लिन के ऊपर अगर स्टेट्स काम करेंगे तो निश्चित तौर पे ये अपॉर्चुनिटीज ह्यूज, पर्टिकुलरली बीओटी प्रोजेक्ट्स के अंदर जहाँ पर स्टेट्स का फाइनेंशियली इन्वॉल्वमेंट कम है, वहाँ पर ये एक अच्छी अपॉर्चुनिटी है। लेकिन अगेन जब लैंड एक्विजिशन के, चूँकि ये स्टेट इशू है और यहाँ पर अगर अभी आने वाले समय में अगर ये देखते हैं तो जो प्रोजेक्ट्स जो आ रहे हैं वो जनरली ग्रीन फील्ड है। अगर 10% या 5% लैंड भी एक्विजिशन नहीं हुई है तो प्रोजेक्ट रेवेन्यू जनरेट नहीं करता है। अब ये रेवेन्यू का कंपनसेशन करने के लिए स्टेट को पास में फाइनेंसिंग कोई पोजीशनिंग नहीं होती है। अगर लैंड एक्विजिशन और फाइनेंशियल ट्रांसपेरेंसी रहे, फाइनेंशियल इम्प्लीकेशन जो भी हो, उसके ऊपर अगर स्टेट काम करे तो निश्चित तौर पे एक ह्यूज अपॉर्चुनिटी है जिसको आगे टैप किया जा सकता है।
In fact, we are seeing a lot of traction in state projects now. For instance, as Agarwal ji was saying, maybe lack of transparency or the format of the PPP itself was a problem earlier. But now, we recently had looked at some of the projects of MSRDC, BOT projects, Pune-Shirur, I think it's all in the public domain. The PPP concession agreement is the same as the NHAI concession agreement. So they are also graduating. State road development corporations are graduating, and these are large projects. These are 6,000 crore plus projects, Pune-Shirur and then again Shirur-Talegaon. So there are 3 stretches almost adding up to 16,000, 18,000 crore together. So these are large projects, and Maharashtra has set the way. I'm sure the other state road development corporations also will follow this. So there is a huge opportunity in state roads, and the format is getting better.
Just to add to that, I feel, contract is just one part of a infrastructure project. Contract being concession agreement, power purchase agreement, transmission services agreement, etc., which is easier to implement. And as Samuel said, a lot of these state government agencies are already taking away good points from central contracts and implementing them in their contracts. Having said that, I think there are two things lacking and which would develop only over a period of time. One is the experience of these concessioning authorities. Right? NHI, for example, has more than a couple of decades of history. TECI has a history of decade and a half, etc. And how these contracts are actually implemented on the ground, whether the essence of the contract is being followed or not. Just to give you a couple of examples in case of NHI. Just last week, NHI lost a litigation with respect to reimbursement of fly ash expenses, correct? And very proactively and promptly, today, NHI came out with a circular effectively saying that all of the companies don't need to go and litigate in this matter. We have lost the case, we acknowledge, and hence we have coming out of the circular, we're laying down a process to claim the reimbursement for all the developers. Now, has any such thing happened with the state government authority so far? I would say, to my knowledge, no. And these kind of things give significant amount of confidence to various players, whether it is developers, investors, the institutional investors, retail investors, etc. Give confidence on the stability of the sector and how things will be handled in case there is some undue or negative implication on the concessionaire, which is outside their control because of whether it is a political force majeure or something else. So I think these are things which will be established only over a period of time. Contract can happen overnight, but how that is implemented on the ground and how investors develop trust on that, faith on that, will happen gradually. So I think that is what states need to consciously work upon.
Perfect. I think we've just 3 minutes of time left, and I can take 1 or 2 questions if there are any in the audience. I don't see any. So there is one.
Yeah, my name is Mukesh Kumar. मेरा सवाल सर अग्रवाल जी से है. आपने सर भी देखा होगा NHI में जो बिडिंग ट्रेंड है, ऐसा ट्रेंड 2008-9 में भी हम लोगों ने देखा था, जिसे हम लोग अग्रेसिव बिडिंग बोलते हैं. अभी हम देख रहे हैं कि NHI हैम प्रोजेक्ट में कुछ बिड 40%, 45% NHI कॉस्ट एस्टिमेट से नीचे है. तो इस सिनेरियो में सर आपके हिसाब से ये सब प्रोजेक्ट वायबल कैसे हैं, और NHI को इस टाइप के एग्रेसिव बिडिंग को रोकने के लिए क्या करना चाहिए सर? थैंक यू.
अभी जिस तरह की जो बिडिंग हो रही है, जैसे आपने ठीक कहा 40% तक डिस्काउंट रेट पे, ये प्रोजेक्ट वाइबल तो नहीं हो सकते. कुछ प्रोजेक्ट्स के अंदर नो डाउट जो डीपीआर बनी है वो प्रॉपर नहीं बनी हुई है, लेकिन ये जो 40% की जो डिस्काउंटिंग है, ये अल्टीमेटली कहीं ना कहीं क्वालिटी और डिलीवरी पर इफेक्ट करेगी. अथॉरिटी भी इसके ऊपर काम कर रही है, NHI इसके ऊपर स्पेशल एक्स्ट्रा जो सिक्योरिटी बैंक गारंटी है उसका प्रपोजल रखा हुआ है. लेकिन एक बड़ा कारण ये भी है कि जो अवार्डिंग ऑफ प्रोजेक्ट्स जो जिस तरह से रिड्यूस हुआ है, उसमें जो नए जो कंसेशनर या कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स हैं वो डिस्परेट है कि किसी भी तरह से प्रोजेक्ट होने चाहिए, उनके पास में मैन पावर मशीनरी एडिशनल है, उनको कैटर करने के लिए वो इस तरह से प्रोजेक्ट पे बिडिंग करते हैं. लेकिन अथॉरिटी इसके ऊपर पूरा फोकस है, और पीछे अगर अपन देखें उस समय से क्वालिटी में भी जिस तरह से एक्सपोज हुए हैं उसके ऊपर भी काम किया जा रहा है. पर अल्टीमेटली इंडिया में अपने प्रोजेक्ट अवार्ड का जो सिस्टम है वो L1 ही है. इवन 5,000 6,000 करोड़ के प्रोजेक्ट्स को अगर सिंगल रुपीज से भी L1 L2 में डिफरेंस है, L1 को ही दिया जाएगा। इसके ऊपर भी अपने को काम करना पड़ेगा कि किस तरह से रीजनेबल कॉस्ट के ऊपर प्रोजेक्ट्स अवार्ड हो। वर्ल्ड लेवल पे या किस तरह से ये काम होगा, अभी नियर फ्यूचर में ये मुश्किल है, पर नो डाउट गवर्नमेंट आनी चाहिए, सभी मिलकर इसके ऊपर काम करें।
Just one more question to Samuel. Now the SAID example, say 30, 35%, 40% or 30% below NHI cost, how a banker should differentiate, say, between a 20% or 10% discount to a 30% discount? Because at the end of the day, when that 30, 40% discount projects are getting financial closure, how should we differentiate?
How should we?
Differentiate.
We have said no to many of these projects.
Not from a NAFED perspective, I'm saying entire from a banking fraternity perspective.
There could be valid reasons also. On first sight, it looks as if it's an aggressive bidding. But we rely on technical studies. So if we are satisfied, I think the banks will go ahead. But otherwise, many of the projects have not achieved financial closure, such projects. Let's say about three quarters or 1 year, 1.5 years back, most of these HAM projects were considered to be very risk-free, or it was like a structured retail asset financing. But now I think most of the banks have realized there is a huge implementation risk when bids are won with this sort of 30, 40% discount, and many of them are not getting financial closure today.
Hi, this is Rajesh Kade.
I think we take the last question. Yes, please go ahead.
मेरा सवाल अग्रवाल साहब से ही है। सर, जैसे अभी एक महोदय ने आपको पूछा कि हमारे टेंडर्स 40% तक नीचे जाते हैं, तो क्या हमारे टेंडर में कोई क्लॉज ऐसे इनबिल्ट नहीं है क्या? और जब प्री क्वालिफिकेशन वगैरह करते हैं तो कोई क्वालिटी कम कॉस्ट बेस्ड मेथड यूज़ नहीं की जाती है? या हमारे कंसल्टेंट जो सुपरवाइज करते हैं कामों के ऊपर, are they not having proper kind of a monitoring and supervision so that the entire life of the project, say it is designed for 50 years and it is maintained like that?
Not understand. Voice was not clear actually. If you can just repeat in small sentence. Yeah. He's saying not only on cost but also on quality, and quality probably judged due to past experience of the same developer.
Correct.
ये ऐसा ही है अभी भी। फर्स्ट टेक्निकल बिड होता है, उसके बाद में फाइनेंशियल बिड है। टेक्निकल बिड में प्रीवियस एक्सपीरियंस के बेस पे टेक्निकल स्कोर है। ये थोड़ा सिस्टम की कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी है कि आप 30% डिस्काउंट दे रहे हो, इसके बेस पे आपको कोई एडिशनल मेजरमेंट नहीं लगाया जा सकता। अभी अपने जो सिस्टम है वो L1 का ही है, क्लियर, कि फर्स्ट आप टेक्निकली क्वालिफाई हैं, टेक्निकली क्वालिफिकेशन होने के बाद में जो फाइनेंशियल बिड ही फाइनल। अभी एडिशनल कुछ भी, क्योंकि फ्यूचर में आप किस तरह से काम करोगे ये देखा नहीं जा सकता। आज के दिन जो क्वालिफिकेशन है वो पीछे के आपके एक्सपीरियंस के बेस पे ही। कुछ कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी जेवीके के साथ में, बाहर की कंपनी के साथ में जेवी करके भी कुछ प्रोजेक्ट एडजस्टमेंट हो जाते हैं, लेकिन इन जनरल में वहाँ पर कोई, मैं कहूँगा, फेयरनेस है। लेकिन इस नई सिचुएशन में किस तरह से किया जाए उसके ऊपर अथॉरिटी काम कर रही है।
So thank you so much for a patient hearing, and we'll take all other questions offline. Thank you Agarwal ji, Mr. Samuel, Gaurav, for gracing this conversation, and hand over to your MC.
thank you, Ms. Kasture, and our distinguished panelists for an insightful discussion on the future of connectivity and transport infrastructure. As a token of our appreciation, we will now felicitate our panelists. May I request Ms. Revati Kasture to kindly join us for the presentation of the mementos. May I request Mr. Ajendra Kumar Agarwal to kindly come forward to accept a gesture of our sincere appreciation for sharing his time and valuable experience with us today. I now invite Mr. Samuel Joseph to kindly come forward as we take this opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate his valuable perspectives. May we have a round of applause, please. And may I now request Mr. Gaurav Chandna to kindly join us as we present a token of our appreciation for your valuable contribution to today's discussion. Thank you, sir. I request our moderator and panelists to remain on stage for a group photograph, please. Thank you once again to our panelists for their valuable contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, another warm round of applause for this panel. Thank you. Before we proceed to dinner, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed the panel discussions and found the conversations enriching. As we draw the formal proceedings to a close, we now come to the final segment of today's program. I invite Ms. Rajshri Murkute, Senior Director, CareEdge Ratings, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As we draw the curtains on a truly enriching and thought-provoking sessions today, it's my privilege to express my deepest gratitude to all those who have contributed in making CareEdge Conversations Infrastructure Landscape 2026 a truly insightful and impactful success. The insights shared through the evening have reiterated the importance of long-term policy vision, sustained investment, technological innovation, and close collaboration among the government, industry, and all stakeholders. At the outset, we are deeply honored by the presence of our chief guest, Mr. Gautam Adani, founder and chairman, Adani Group, and thank him for sharing his invaluable perspectives on the opportunities and challenges in shaping India's infrastructure journey. Sir, your deep insights have helped set the stage for meaningful discussions on how India can build resilient, future-ready infrastructure to support its growth ambitions through capital, confidence, and capability. Our first panel conversations on powering India's energy security with Mr. Kuldeep Jain, Mr. Abhishek Parekh, Mr. CareEdge Vaswani, and Mr. Sandeep Lakhanpal, moderated by Mr. Sachin Gupta, were particularly significant. As India pursues the dual objectives of sustaining economic growth while advancing its clean energy transition, the need for reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy systems have never been greater. The perspectives shared today highlighted both the scale of the opportunity and importance of innovation, investment, and policy support in securing India's energy ambition. Besides, special focus on transmission bottlenecks and rising competitive intensity brought out a notable area that cannot be undermined. Equally compelling were the deliberations of a second panel on reimagining transport infrastructure featuring Mr. Ajendra Agarwal, Mr. Samuel Joseph, and Mr. Gaurav Chandna, which was moderated by Ms. Revati Kasture. From highways, railways, ports, and airports to integrated multimodal logistics networks, today's discussions underscored how enhanced connectivity can bring about more productivity, improve efficiency, and accelerate inclusive growth across the country. In fact, the deliberations also highlighted on the innovative solutions, both at the execution phase as well as the financing solutions, which are indeed noteworthy takeaways for the session. A recurring theme throughout the conclave today has been the critical role of financing and private sector participation in realizing India's infrastructure ambitions. The exchange of ideas around investment, risk mitigation, capital mobilization, and sustainable funding models have provided valuable insights into the path ahead. To all our esteemed panelists and moderators, thank you for steering these conversations with depth, clarity, and conviction. Your expertise and diverse perspectives have indeed transformed today's sessions into meaningful dialogues that will resonate well beyond the conclave. To the infrastructure rating teams, thank you for your tireless efforts in bringing together an incredibly insightful and exhaustive knowledge report on infrastructure. A special word of appreciation to our corporate communications and the business relationship team and everyone involved in organizing this event. Your meticulous planning and flawless execution ensured a seamless experience for all our guests and participants. We are also grateful to our venue partners, Geo Convention Center, for their outstanding hospitality and support throughout the day. To our friends from the media, thank you for joining us and for helping amplify the important conversations that have taken place today. Your role in bringing these insights to a wider audience is invaluable. Finally, to all our delegates, partners, and clients and participants, thank you for your active engagement and enthusiasm. Your presence and contributions are what make forums like these truly meaningful. I hope today's conversations inspire stronger partnerships, innovative solutions, and decisive action. On behalf of CareEdge, thank you once again for being part of the CareEdge Conversations Infrastructure Landscape 2026. Please join us for cocktails and dinner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murkute, for those thoughtful closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of CareEdge, we thank you for your presence and participation this evening. As they say, sabar ka phal meeta hota hai, so we hope your dinner and drinks taste that much better. Cocktails and dinner are now open. We invite you to continue the conversations, connect with fellow guests, and enjoy the hospitality. Thank you. मैं बुला रहा हूँ बस family to kindly join us on stage.